Pamela Holt learned about the auction while a nurse was helping her sit upright. The surgery had taken nearly 5 hours. Her mouth tasted dry and metallic, and a firm bandage covered the lower part of her back. Every movement required an order now. Hands first, feet flat. Breathe out. Push slowly, don't twist. The nurse had just settled her against 2 pillows when Pamela's phone began vibrating on the tray. Rachel had called 4 times. Pamela pressed her daughter's name. What happened? For a moment, Rachel said nothing. Voices moved behind her, along with the hollow clatter of something heavy being set on a truck bed. It went better than I expected, Rachel said. What went better? The auction. Pamela kept one hand against the hospital mattress. What auction? Another voice called Rachel's name. Rachel covered the phone, answered someone, then came back sounding impatient. Mom, we talked about this. The farm is costing money every month. The equipment's sitting there. The roof over the west shed is going. You can't keep carrying all of it. Pamela looked toward the nurse. The woman had stepped away to check the monitor, giving her the privacy people offered when they knew something had gone wrong but didn't know what. Rachel, where are you? At the farm. Pamela heard an engine start. It was close to the phone, close enough that Rachel raised her voice over it. Who's there? The auction crew is finishing up. Pamela pulled the phone away and looked at the screen, as though another name might appear there. Then she put it back to her ear. I'm in the hospital. I know. You held an auction while I was in surgery? Rachel let out a breath. That's not how I'd say it. How would you say it? I'd say I handled something that couldn't wait. Pamela's back tightened beneath the bandage. A bright line of pain moved down her right leg, and the room seemed to lean sideways. The nurse came back at once. Mrs. Holt, put your feet up. Pamela shook her head. Mom, Rachel said, are you there? What did you sell? The usable machinery, the old freezer units, some tools, the hay wagon. The acreage had one winning bidder, but that isn't closed yet. Pamela heard each item separately. The red hay wagon Howard had rebuilt. The upright freezer from the machine shed. The socket cabinet Pamela had organized by size because Rachel's father never returned anything to its proper drawer. Ordinary things, but each one had occupied a known place in her life that morning. By afternoon, strangers were carrying them away. You had no permission to sell the land. I have your financial power of attorney, for bills, for the hospital. If I couldn't sign something. You couldn't sign anything today. I was unconscious. That's exactly the problem. The nurse took the phone gently from Pamela's hand and ended the call. You can have that back when you're lying down, she said. My daughter sold my farm. I heard enough to understand that. I need to call her back. You need to keep your blood pressure out of the ceiling, Pamela wanted to argue. Instead, she allowed the nurse to lift her legs onto the bed. It took both of them to turn her without twisting. By the time she was settled, sweat had gathered under Pamela's hair. The nurse placed the phone beyond reach. 10 minutes, she said. Then you can make one call. Pamela watched the second hand on the wall clock. Rachel sent 3 messages during those 10 minutes. The first said the winning bidder had 18 days to complete the purchase. The second said Pamela's medical bills had to come from somewhere. The third said, please don't make this uglier than it has to be. Pamela read that one twice. She had signed the power of attorney 6 days earlier at Rachel's kitchen table. Rachel had set the papers beside a bowl of apples and marked the signature lines with blue tabs. It's just in case, Rachel had said. Hospitals lose forms. Insurance companies ask the same question 12 ways. Let me handle the noise while you recover. Pamela had been frightened then, though she hadn't shown it. The surgeon had explained the procedure clearly. A narrowed space in her spine was pressing against nerves. Without surgery, the weakness in her leg would worsen. With surgery, there were no promises, only a fair chance. Rachel had offered to stay at the farmhouse for the first week after Pamela came home. She'd made a list of medications, she'd bought a raised toilet seat and complained about its price. She had looked competent, worried, and slightly annoyed, which was how Rachel often looked when she was trying to help. Pamela had signed. Nothing in that kitchen had suggested an auctioneer would be standing in her yard before the bandage was dry. The nurse returned the phone after 11 minutes. Pamela called Rachel again. This time, it went to voicemail. She called the farm's landline. It rang 8 times before the answering machine picked up. Howard's old recorded greeting played through the speaker. You've reached the Holt place. If you're calling about hogs, leave a number. If you're selling something, save us both the trouble. Pamela closed her eyes. Howard had died in 2018, but she'd never changed the message. Rachel had asked her to. She said customers found it confusing, though there hadn't been customers at the farm in years. Pamela kept it, because hearing her father's voice for 7 seconds made the empty kitchen less empty. After the beep, Pamela said, "If anyone is in my house, answer the phone." Someone picked up. There was breathing first, then a man's voice. "Hello? Who is this?" Craig Brewer. Pamela knew the name. Brewer Regional Meats supplied shops and small groceries across southwestern Wisconsin. Howard had complained about companies like Craig's when they first appeared. Later, he'd admitted Craig paid on time. "Why are you answering my telephone?" "I was inside with your daughter. She stepped out." "Why were you inside?" Craig paused. "I won the property bid." Pamela's fingers tightened around the phone. "The farm isn't sold." "No. There's a closing period. Then get out of my house." He did not argue. "I'll leave the key on the kitchen table." "You have a key?" "Your daughter gave me one so I could look through the buildings." Pamela tried to picture Rachel selecting a key from the hook beside the mudroom door. There were 7 there: the back door, cellar, machine shed, 2 padlocks, gasoline cabinet, and the small brass key her father had kept for the smokehouse. That brass key had always hung alone on the bottom hook. "Which buildings did you enter?" "The farmhouse, machine shed, barn, the smokehouse?" "No." His answer came quickly, but not nervously. Craig knew she was listening for uncertainty. "Did Rachel show it to you?" "She called it a cleanup problem." Pamela looked down at the blanket over her knees. "It isn't hers to call anything." "I understand you're in the hospital." "That doesn't answer me." "No, she didn't show me inside." Pamela heard the kitchen door open on his end. Rachel said, "Who are you talking to?" Craig answered her, too quietly for Pamela to make out. Then Rachel came onto the line. "Mom, why are you calling the house?" "Because a stranger answered." "He isn't a stranger. Craig bought the farm. He placed a bid. He signed an auction agreement. You gave him my key. He needed to inspect what he bought." Pamela felt the nurse watching from the doorway. She lowered her voice. "Look beside the mudroom door. Is the brass key there?" "What brass key?" "Your grandfather's smokehouse key." "I don't know. There are keys everywhere. There are 7 keys on that board. The brass one hangs on the bottom hook." Rachel went quiet. Pamela could hear her walking. A chair scraped. Keys clicked against wood. "It's not here," Rachel said. "Find it. Mom, I have 40 things happening. Find that key. I'm sure it's in a drawer. It has never been in a drawer." Rachel's patience broke. The smokehouse is falling down. The back corner has sunk. The roof is open, and there's old grease all over the floor. The auctioneer put $12,000 on it as salvage and liability. Craig wasn't interested in arguing over an outbuilding that may cost more to remove. Pamela pushed herself higher against the pillows and stopped when the pain warned her. "Did anyone go inside?" "The door was locked." "Did anyone try?" "I don't know." "You were running the auction." "Yes, while also dealing with the hospital, the insurance calls, the bank, the auction company, and everything you've ignored for the last 3 years. Pamela could hear the truth mixed into the cruelty. The farm did need work. Her surgery would cost money. The barn roof had leaked all spring. She'd postponed repairs because her right foot sometimes went numb on ladders, and she had not told Rachel how often that happened. But need wasn't permission. "Put Craig back on," Pamela said. "He's leaving. Then you leave too." "This is ridiculous. Lock the kitchen door. Put every key you have on the table. Then go." "Mom, you can't even get out of bed." The words landed more quietly than the rest. Rachel regretted them as soon as she said them. Pamela knew her daughter well enough to hear the slight change in her breathing. Rachel could have apologized. Instead, she waited for Pamela to make it easier. Pamela didn't. "Leave my house," she said. Rachel ended the call. The nurse crossed the room and adjusted the blanket near Pamela's feet. "Do you have someone else who can check the place?" Pamela thought through the people she still knew around Viroqua. Most were her age, some were older. A few would help, but help traveled fast in a small town, and so did embarrassment. There was one person who wouldn't turn it into gossip. She called Arthur Perry. Arthur answered on the 4th ring. "Pam, I'm at the hospital. I know that. I was going to call tomorrow. How'd it go? I can move both feet. That sounds promising." Rachel auctioned the farm this morning. Arthur said nothing for so long that Pamela checked whether the call had dropped. "What do you mean, auctioned?" She used the power of attorney. Equipment is already gone. Someone named Craig Brewer placed the winning bid on the land. I know Craig. So do I now. When are you home? They said maybe 3 days. I'll pick you up. Rachel was supposed to. Then Rachel can enjoy a free afternoon. Despite herself, Pamela almost smiled. It hurt her back, so she stopped. I need you to go out there, she said. Don't touch anything. Take pictures of every room and building. Check the locks. See what's missing. All right. And look for Dad's smokehouse key. The brass one? Yes. Arthur knew that key. He had worked beside Howard for decades, starting when they built the smokehouse in 1979. He'd carried hams through its narrow door, split firewood behind it, and slept on feed sacks during overnight cures when the weather turned colder than expected. Should be on the bottom hook, he said. It isn't. Arthur's voice changed. Who had the keys? Rachel, then Craig. Did either of them open the smokehouse? They say no. Do you want me to force it? No. Just look. Pam, if the auction crew damaged something, we may need photographs before rain. I said, don't touch anything. All right. He understood the second meaning. It was still her property, and she needed one person to act like it. Arthur reached the farm 28 minutes later. He kept Pamela on the phone as he drove up County Road B. Gravel snapped beneath his tires. The sound was familiar enough that Pamela could picture each bend. There are 2 trucks leaving, he said. What kind? One flatbed with a hay wagon, another pulling a trailer. Your green tool cabinet's on it. Pamela turned her face toward the hospital window. Beyond the glass, the afternoon was flat and pale. She had repaired the cabinet's bottom drawer herself, after Rachel's father bent it with a tractor jack. Photographed the license plates. I already did. That was the first useful thing anyone had done without arguing. Arthur parked beside the farmhouse at 1887 County Road B. The yard was cut by fresh tire tracks. White auction tags hung from the barn door, the fuel tank, and the machine shed latch. A paper cup rolled near the porch steps. The kitchen door's locked, he said. Use the spare under the milk can. No spare. Pamela's stomach tightened. Rachel knows it's there. Maybe she took it inside. Go around to the front. The window beside the porch doesn't latch if you lift the lower sash first. Are you asking a retired butcher to climb through your window? I'm asking you to check my house. My knees would like their objection entered into the record. Use the porch chair. Arthur moved the chair. Pamela heard wood scrape across boards, then the grunt he tried to hide. A minute later, glass rattled. I'm in, he said. Are the keys on the kitchen table? Yes, 6 on a ring, 2 loose. Count them. 9 altogether. Pamela went through them by description, while Arthur held each one up to the light. The house keys were there, so were the machine shed key and both padlock keys. 3 unfamiliar keys had been added, likely from the auction company. The brass key was not among them. Arthur photographed the rooms, then went outside. The machine shed stood half empty. Clean rectangles marked the floor where equipment had rested for years. In the barn, lengths of baling twine hung from nails with nothing beneath them. He reached the smokehouse last. Howard had built it from red brick and field stone, with a steep metal roof and a narrow wooden door darkened by weather. One corner of the roof dipped. A section of gutter had pulled away and lay in the weeds. Rachel hadn't lied about its condition. The door's still locked, Arthur said. Look at the hasp. The hasp is old but sound. And the lock? Arthur bent closer. He stopped talking. What is it? There are scratches around the keyway. Old? No. Pamela pressed the phone against her ear. Arthur rubbed one mark with his thumb. Bright metal showed beneath the gray surface. Someone had put a key into that lock recently. They had missed the opening more than once, perhaps in poor light or in a hurry. Rachel had said the door was locked. Craig had said he hadn't entered. Neither statement explained the missing key. Take a close picture, Pamela said. I have it. Now cover the lock. With what? There's a coffee tin on the shelf inside the woodshed. Get a clean rag from the farmhouse. Wrap the lock, put the tin over it, and tie it with wire. I don't want rain or anyone's hands on those scratches. Arthur was quiet for a moment. You sound more awake. I am. Her pain had not gone. The farm had not returned. Rachel still held the power of attorney, and a buyer had 18 days before closing. But the missing key was no longer a lost household item. Someone had taken it, someone had tried the smokehouse lock, and Pamela had decided what she would do next. Arthur, she said, When they discharge me, don't bring me to Rachel's house. I wasn't planning to. Bring me home. Good, Arthur said. Then home is where we'll go. The following morning, Rachel arrived with a canvas tote bag, a paper cup of coffee, and a folder tucked under her arm. She had changed clothes since the auction. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore the gray cardigan Pamela had given her for Christmas. She looked like a daughter visiting a sick mother, which made the previous day harder to hold in one piece. I brought your robe, Rachel said, the blue one, not the heavy one. Thank you, and your slippers, but the nurse says they don't want you walking in anything without a heel. Pamela looked inside the tote. Rachel had packed clean underwear, a toothbrush, a comb, and the paperback from Pamela's nightstand. These were the things a person brought when she knew someone well. Rachel had even remembered the unscented hand cream because hospital soap made Pamela's skin crack. She placed the coffee on the windowsill, beyond Pamela's reach. That's mine, Rachel said. You're still on clear liquids. I know, I spoke with the discharge coordinator. So did I. Rachel blinked. She said you'll need someone with you all the time for the first few days. She said someone should check on me. No, Mom, she said someone should stay. Pamela glanced toward the door. Close that, please. Rachel closed it and sat in the vinyl chair beside the bed. The folder remained on her lap. Arthur is taking me home. Rachel's mouth tightened. Arthur is 72. He still drives. That isn't what I meant. I know what you meant. Rachel set the folder on the rolling tray. My guest room is ready. I moved the exercise bike and put fresh sheets on the bed. The bathroom is on the same floor. You wouldn't have to deal with those farmhouse stairs. My bedroom is on the ground floor. The shower isn't. I can wash at the sink for a week. That's your solution? It's one solution. Rachel rubbed her forehead. She'd done that since college. Whenever Pamela refused to give the answer Rachel had already chosen. You make everything harder, she said. Pamela looked at the tote bag again. Every item in it was correct. Rachel had always been good at the practical edge of caring. She remembered brands, appointment times, shoe sizes, and whether someone took milk. What she struggled with was the part where the other person remained a person. You went through my bedroom, Pamela said, to get your things. And the desk? Rachel's eyes moved to the folder. What's in there? Nothing you need to deal with today. Then why did you bring it? Rachel leaned back. Because you asked me to bring every key, and I wanted to show you the property paperwork at the same time. I asked you to leave the keys on the table. I didn't feel comfortable leaving them in an empty house. You left Craig in the house for 10 minutes with my keys. He gave them back. Pamela held out her hand. Rachel didn't move. The keys, Pamela said. You can't drive, you can barely stand. Why do you need 9 keys in a hospital? Because they're mine. Rachel looked toward the closed door, then opened her handbag. She placed the key ring and 2 loose keys in Pamela's palm. They were cold from the air outside. Pamela sorted through them slowly. Rachel watched with the strained patience of someone waiting for an elderly stranger to count change at a register. The brass key was not there. Pamela placed the keys in the bedside drawer and shut it. Happy? Rachel asked. No. I knew that was the wrong word. You knew before you said it. Rachel stood and walked to the window. The hospital overlooked a parking lot bordered by dirty snow. In the distance, the hills around Viroqua were bare and brown under the March sky. I didn't do this to hurt you, she said. Pamela waited. I know you think I woke up one morning and decided to take something. I didn't. I've been trying to keep things going for months. What things? Your insurance, the property taxes, the electric bill at the farm, the propane account, the surgeon's office. The bank called twice because you mailed a check without signing it. I signed it. You signed the memo line. Pamela remembered the check. She'd written it at the kitchen table after a night when pain had kept her awake until dawn. She had torn it up when Rachel pointed out the mistake. She hadn't known the bank had called her daughter. One check, Pamela said. It's never one thing with you. It's 20 small things, and everyone becomes my job because you won't admit you need help. Helping isn't deciding what I own. There was no income. The farm has a lease payment coming in April. The lease barely covers taxes and insurance. You didn't ask me about the lease. I saw it in your files. Pamela's gaze settled on the folder. You read my files. I was trying to understand what was happening. You could have asked. I did ask. You said you had it handled. Pamela had said that. She'd said it each time Rachel offered to review a bill or call the insurance office. Then Pamela had handed over passwords when the pain became bad enough. She'd asked Rachel to put the accounts on automatic payment. She'd let her organize the folders in the desk, because bending over the bottom drawer made her leg burn. Each favor had seemed temporary. Rachel had not stolen her way into every corner. Pamela had opened some doors herself, then acted surprised when Rachel stopped knocking. That truth did not excuse the auction. It did, however, make the shape of the problem clearer. "Sit down," Pamela said. "I've been sitting. Sit down anyway." Rachel returned to the chair. Pamela nodded at the folder. "Show me." Rachel opened it. Inside were photographs from the auction listing, a printed inventory, the bidder agreement, and an estimate of Pamela's hospital costs. Several pages had yellow marks along the margins. Pamela reached for the inventory. Rachel put her hand on it. "You're supposed to rest. Move your hand." Rachel did. The list was 4 pages long. Each item had a number, a short description, and the amount bid. The hay wagon had sold for less than Pamela paid to replace its tires. Howard's drill press brought a little more. A set of hog gates had been bundled with fencing tools because the auctioneer thought they belonged together. Pamela read every line. "Where's the cream separator? Nobody wanted it. It isn't listed." Then it's still there. "The cider press? Also still there." "What about the hand tools from the smokehouse?" "We didn't open the smokehouse." Pamela looked up. "You tried." Rachel's expression changed. Arthur found fresh scratches on the lock. He found scratches on a lock that's been outside for decades. Fresh scratches. "I don't know what you want me to say. Who tried the key? I didn't see anyone try a key. That wasn't my question." Rachel closed the folder. "The auctioneer asked whether there was access. I told him I thought there was a key in the kitchen. So someone took it. Maybe. Who? I don't know." "Did you take it off the hook?" "No." The answer came fast. Pamela could not tell whether it was honest or prepared. Rachel's phone rang. She looked at the screen and silenced it. "That's the auction company," she said. "They need to know when they can collect the remaining items. They can't. Those items were sold. Nothing else leaves until I've checked the inventory. The buyers have pickup times. Cancel them." "Mom, you have the authority to handle my bills. You don't have the authority to empty the place while I lie here." Rachel opened her mouth, then stopped. What she wanted to say was that she had already done it. What she understood, for the first time since entering the room, was that Pamela might no longer cooperate. Rachel pushed the folder aside. "Fine. I'll pause pickup until you get home. Put that in writing." "You don't trust me now?" "I want it in writing." The question hurt more than Rachel intended, partly because both women knew the answer had once been different. Rachel typed a message to the auction coordinator. She turned the screen toward Pamela before sending it. At Pamela Holt's direction, no additional property is to be removed from the farm until she completes a personal inventory. Pamela read it twice. "Send it." Rachel sent it. A reply arrived less than a minute later. Pickup appointments would be suspended for 48 hours. After that, the auction company wanted instructions because buyers had already paid. It was a small pause, not a recovery. Still, the cream separator and cider press would remain where they were for 2 more days. So, with whatever tools had not yet been loaded, Pamela handed the phone back. "Thank you." Rachel gave a tired laugh. "You say that, like I'm the receptionist. I'm trying to speak to you without fighting." That's new. The words hung between them. For years, Pamela had believed that being undemanding kept them close. She rarely called Rachel unless she needed something definite. She declined invitations when the roads were icy. She said the farm kept her busy when Rachel forgot a birthday supper or left early at Christmas. Pamela had thought she was protecting her dignity. Rachel had taken the quiet as proof that her mother could be placed wherever there was room. Even now, part of Pamela wanted to let the auction go forward, so Rachel would not call her stubborn. That part was familiar and deeply embarrassing. The physical therapist knocked and entered with a walking belt. "Ready for the haul?" she asked. Rachel stood. She was dizzy last night. The therapist looked at Pamela. "Were you dizzy?" "For a few minutes after medication." "Any dizziness today?" "No." Rachel picked up the tote bag. "I'll wait outside." "You can stay," Pamela said. The therapist fastened the belt around Pamela's waist. "We'll start with standing. Keep your back straight and push through your legs." Pamela gripped the walker. Pain weighted along her spine, dull but watchful. Rachel moved closer without being asked. Her hands lifted slightly, ready to catch her mother. Don't pull my arm, Pamela said. I wasn't going to. You always do. I'm trying to help. Then let her show you how. The therapist explained where Rachel could stand and how to steady the belt without lifting. Rachel listened. Pamela noticed that she listened better to instructions from strangers. Pamela pushed herself upright. Her right leg trembled. The room narrowed, then cleared. She held still until both feet felt solid beneath her. That's enough, Rachel said. The therapist ignored her. How do you feel, Pamela? Upright. Pain? 5. Can you take a step? Pamela moved the walker forward. Her left foot followed, then the right. Rachel's hand hovered near the belt, but did not touch it. Pamela crossed the room, rested, then reached the doorway. The distance was no more than 12 feet. Her hospital gown pulled at the shoulders. Her hair had not been washed in 2 days. Nothing about it looked impressive. But she was standing in the open doorway when Arthur came down the hall carrying a clean coat and a dented metal cash box. He stopped when he saw her. You're early, Pamela said. So are you. What's in the box? Things I found in the bottom drawer of your desk. Checkbooks, insurance papers, farm lease, and the cash you keep in an envelope marked furnace. Rachel stared at him. You went through her desk? She asked me to bring what she'd need. Pamela had done no such thing, but Arthur was looking at her steadily. When did I ask? She said. On the phone. You may have been medicated. Rachel folded her arms. That's convenient. Arthur set the cash box on the visitor's chair. The desk drawer was open. Auction photographs were spread across the floor. I thought important papers shouldn't stay that way. Pamela understood. Arthur had seen the same thing she was only beginning to see. The house was locked, but control of it had become loose and public. Thank you, she said. Rachel looked from the box to the bedside drawer where Pamela had placed the keys. You're moving everything away from me. No, Pamela said. I'm taking it back into my own hands. You asked for my help. I did. I also let you do things because it was easier than disagreeing with you. That isn't my fault. No, that part is mine. Rachel's face softened for a second. An admission was what she'd wanted, but not this kind. Pamela had admitted dependence without agreeing to remain dependent. The therapist guided Pamela back toward the bed. On the 6th step, her right knee weakened. Rachel caught the walking belt exactly as she had been shown. She did not pull Pamela's arm. She did not tell her to stop. She held steady until Pamela found her balance. Thank you, Pamela said again. Rachel kept her hand on the belt. You're coming to my house when they release you. Pamela looked at her daughter's fingers, firm around the strap. For one foolish moment, she wanted to say yes. Rachel's guest room would be warm. Meals would appear without effort. Someone would hear if she fell. More than that, saying yes might return them to the arrangement they understood, with Rachel in charge and Pamela grateful enough not to object. Then Pamela looked at Arthur's cash box and the keys in the drawer. No, she said, but I'll need help at the farm. Rachel released the belt. Pamela sat carefully on the bed. You can help me there, if you can do it without taking over. Rachel picked up her coffee. It had gone cold. I don't know if I can, she said. It was the most honest answer she had given since the surgery. Pamela nodded. Then I'll make other arrangements. Rachel looked at Arthur. I assume that means you. It means whoever Pam asks. You have no idea what she needs. I know how to listen. Rachel put the folder into her bag, but Pamela stopped her. Leave the property papers. I need them. So do I. After a brief hesitation, Rachel removed the bidder agreement, inventory, and hospital estimate. She set them on the tray. Craig's deposit is already in the auction company's account, she said. If you interfere with the closing without a valid reason, there could be costs. That sounds like something you should have considered. Rachel's mouth tightened. Call me when you're discharged. I'll call if I need you. That's what I'm afraid of. She picked up the tote and walked out with the robe and slippers still inside. Pamela almost called her back. Then Arthur opened the dented cash box and showed her the farm papers arranged in neat stacks. You took a risk bringing those, Pamela said. I took papers out of an unlocked drawer in a house where strangers had been walking around. You also lied about me asking. Not well. No. Arthur pulled a chair closer. Do you want me to put them back? Not yet. That afternoon, Pamela went through the bidder agreement while medication made the lines blur. She rested, tried again, and marked each place she didn't understand with the hospital's short yellow pencil. The farm was described as one parcel. including the farmhouse, barn, machine shed, smokehouse, and surrounding acreage. The bidder had 18 days after the auction to inspect the title work and complete payment. Until then, the agreement restricted substantial changes to the property. Rachel had signed as Pamela's attorney, in fact. Pamela's own signature appeared nowhere. The document did not tell her whether Rachel had the legal right to sign it. It only showed that everyone else was proceeding as though she did. The next morning, the physical therapist made Pamela climb 4 practice steps. She hated each one. Her right foot dragged slightly on the third, but she corrected it before anyone touched her. By noon, the surgeon approved her discharge with restrictions. No lifting more than a full kettle, no driving, no bending or twisting, short walks several times a day. Someone should stay nearby for the first night. Arthur arrived with Pamela's winter coat and a folded wool blanket. "Where's Rachel?" the nurse asked. "She isn't coming," Pamela said. The nurse looked at Arthur. "You'll be staying with her?" "I'll be close." "That isn't the same. I live 6 minutes away. I brought a camp cot." Pamela turned to him. "You're not sleeping on a camp cot. I've slept on worse. You snore. So did Howard. You managed." The nurse tried not to smile. She reviewed the medications twice, once with Pamela and once with Arthur. Pamela signed the discharge paper herself. Outside, the cold struck her face hard enough to make her gasp. Arthur brought his truck close to the curb and set a wooden step below the passenger door. Getting in took time. Pamela had to back toward the seat, lower herself without twisting, then lift one leg at a time with a looped strap. Arthur waited without offering commentary. Once she was settled, he tucked the wool blanket over her knees. "You look pleased with yourself," he said. "I got into a truck. Today that counts." They drove north through Viroqua, past the courthouse, the feed store, and the grocery where Pamela had shopped every Friday for years. She watched people carrying bags to their cars and felt as though she had been gone for a month instead of 3 days. Arthur turned onto County Road B. The truck suspension found every rut. "Slow down. I'm doing 20, do 15. At 15 we'll be passed by farm cats. Let them pass." The fields were still brown, with strips of old snow lying in shaded ditches. Pamela kept one hand braced against the door. As the farm came into view, she saw the auction signs before she saw the house. A yellow arrow remained tied to the mailbox. Another sign stood near the drive. "Property sold. Subject to closing," printed in heavy black letters. "Stop here," she said. Arthur pulled onto the shoulder. Pamela opened her door. "What are you doing?" "Taking that down." "You can't bend." "You can." Arthur got out, untied the sign, and placed it in the truck bed. He removed the arrow from the mailbox, too. The house looked the same from the road. Closer, it did not. Mud covered the gravel near the barn. The auction tags Arthur had described fluttered from doors and fence posts. 2 rectangles of dead grass showed where equipment had stood. The porch chair remained beneath the window Arthur had climbed through. He parked near the back door. "Wait," Pamela said when he reached for her arm. "Bring the walker first." He did. She used the wooden step, the door handle, and Arthur's shoulder in the order the therapist had shown her. When both feet reached the ground, the cold moved through her hospital socks. Her first walk home was 23 steps from the truck to the mudroom. She counted silently. At 16, her back began to pull. At 19, the right leg weakened. She stopped, breathed, and finished. The mudroom door was locked. Pamela took the keys from her coat pocket and opened it herself. The kitchen smelled of cold coffee, damp boots, and strangers. Paper cups stood beside the sink. Someone had left the refrigerator door slightly open. A stack of auction bidder cards covered the end of the table. One of Howard's wooden kitchen chairs was gone. Pamela looked at its empty place. "That wasn't on the inventory," she said. Arthur checked the printed pages. "No, they took it anyway. Maybe someone moved it. It never leaves this room." She didn't have the strength to search immediately. Arthur helped her remove her coat, then discovered that the furnace thermostat read 49 degrees. "The back window is open," he said. A narrow window above the sink had been left raised. He closed it, checked the furnace, and found the switch turned off. Why would they shut it down? Could have bumped it carrying something. "The switch is inside the cellar stairwell." Arthur looked at her, then turned the furnace on. The blower started with a low rumble. He filled the kettle halfway and made tea. Pamela sat in Howard's chair because it had arms. She could push herself up from it without bending. Arthur carried in the cash box and her medication. He set a notebook on the table and wrote the time of each dose on the first page. "You've done this before," Pamela said. "My brother had knee surgery. You never told me. It wasn't my story to tell." The kitchen warmed slowly. Arthur checked the windows and doors, while Pamela studied the things left behind. The absence of large equipment was obvious, but smaller disturbances bothered her more. The calendar had been taken off the pantry wall and put back crooked. Her grocery list lay under the radiator. A drawer beside the sink was open by an inch. Rachel had treated the house like a place to prepare for sale. That was the familiar pattern, only larger. She saw disorder, corrected it, and expected gratitude. If something stood in her way, she moved it. Pamela drank half the tea. "Bring me the laptop. It's upstairs." "No, I left it in the desk." Arthur found it beneath a pile of auction brochures. The battery was nearly dead, so he ran an extension cord to the table. "What are we looking for?" "The listing." Pamela opened the auction company's website. The farm listing was still active, now marked pending. There were 73 photographs. Rachel had arranged for the pictures 4 days before Pamela's surgery. Pamela moved through them, one at a time. The first showed the front of the farmhouse on a clear morning. The second showed the kitchen. The missing chair was visible beside the table. "Save that," Pamela said. Arthur downloaded the photograph. The next pictures showed the parlor, bedrooms, barn, and equipment. Pamela identified 3 tools that had not appeared on the inventory. Arthur wrote them down. Photograph 38 showed the mudroom. Pamela leaned toward the screen, then stopped when her back objected. "Make it bigger." Arthur enlarged the image. The keyboard was visible beside the door. Most of the keys blurred into a dark cluster, but one hung alone on the bottom hook. It caught the sunlight coming through the window. The brass key. Arthur enlarged it again until the image broke into squares. "That picture was taken 4 days before surgery," Pamela said. "It was there. It was there when Rachel started the auction preparations." Arthur sat beside her. "She said she didn't take it. She said it might have been lost. Maybe the auctioneer took it. Then why isn't it with the returned keys?" They continued through the listing. There were 5 exterior photographs of the smokehouse. One showed the sagging roof. Another showed the door and lock from several feet away. None showed the interior. The description beneath the photograph called the building a former curing structure with an estimated $12,000 salvage value, subject to removal expense. Pamela read the sentence again. Who gave them that number? Could be the auctioneer. Rachel repeated it at the hospital. Arthur opened the printed inventory. The smokehouse wasn't listed as a separate item. It was treated as part of the property, yet someone had taken enough interest to photograph every side. Pamela returned to the mudroom picture. She had expected to find evidence that the key was recently missing. Instead, she had proved it disappeared during the exact period when Rachel controlled access to the farm. That answered one question and made the next one worse. "Print the mudroom picture and the listing date," she said. "Printer's upstairs. Bring it down." "Pam, that thing weighs 20 pounds. Then don't bring it. Email the picture to yourself and print it in town." Arthur nodded. "What else?" "Photograph every page of the bidder agreement. Then we change the house locks. You have new locks? Bottom shelf in the cellar workshop. I bought them after Dad died and never installed them. You can't go into the cellar. I can tell you how." Arthur found the boxed lock sets. Pamela sat at the kitchen table and talked him through removing the old cylinders. Howard had taught her to fit locks when she was young. Arthur knew smoke and meat, but he had never been patient with small springs. "You've got the latch backward," she called. "How can you see from there? I can hear you forcing it." He turned the latch around. The lock slid into place. By late afternoon, the front and back doors opened with 2 new keys. Pamela put one on her ring and handed the other to Arthur. "Not Rachel?" he asked. "Not while she believes that help includes access." Arthur locked the back door and tested it from outside. The new key turned cleanly. The deliberate move worked. For the first time since the auction, Pamela knew exactly who could enter her house. Then Arthur brought in the mail from the roadside box. A large envelope from the auction company sat on top. Inside was a pickup schedule and a notice stating that the temporary pause expired at noon the next day. Buyers would be allowed to collect paid items unless Pamela gave the company a written plan for securing and releasing them. There were 31 lots still on the farm. Pamela looked at the clock. She had less than 24 hours, a spine held together by fresh work, and no complete record of what Rachel had promised away. "Get the notebook," she said. "We're starting in the kitchen." Arthur opened to a clean page. Pamela began with the missing chair. Then came a copper kettle, 2 cast-iron pans, the wall clock from the parlor, and a set of carving knives Howard had kept wrapped in canvas. None appeared on the auction inventory. "Rachel may have moved some of it," Arthur said. "Then we'll find where." They worked outward from the kitchen. Arthur carried the notebook and took photographs. Pamela moved slowly with the walker, stopping at each doorway before entering. The parlor had been used as the auction office. Extension cords crossed the floor, a folding table stood beneath the front window, and strips of masking tape clung to the mantel. The clock had left a pale circle on the wallpaper. "Write down everything, even if it seems small. You planning to count spoons? If the drawer is short, yes." The stairs were beyond her. Arthur photographed the upstairs rooms while they spoke by phone. Pamela directed him from the parlor. "Open the cedar chest. Blankets. How many?" "6. There should be 8. Could be in the linen closet. They aren't." A white auction tag was tied to the chest handle, but the chest did not appear on the list. The auction crew had tagged items during preparation, then changed the lots later. Some tags remained after the decisions were made. Others had disappeared with objects nobody had recorded. By early evening, Pamela's strength gave out. Arthur heated canned tomato soup and made grilled cheese at the kitchen stove. He cut Pamela's sandwich in half without asking, then placed both halves on the plate. "You don't have to make it look like hospital food," she said. "I was checking whether the cheese melted. With a knife, very precise work." They ate at the table with the laptop open between them. Pamela compared Arthur's photographs with the online listing. He had found one missing blanket folded beneath a bed, but the other was gone. The copper kettle appeared in a listing photograph on the kitchen shelf. The next photograph, taken from another angle, showed the shelf empty. "What time were these taken?" Pamela asked. "The website doesn't say. The original files might." Arthur downloaded the photographs. The image details showed they had been taken over 2 mornings. On the first morning, the kettle, clock, chair, and knives were still in place. By the second, they had disappeared. "So they were removed during setup," Arthur said. "Or set aside." "For whom?" Pamela wrote the 4 items at the top of a separate page. At 8, Arthur unfolded his camp cot in the parlor. "You can take Dad's room," Pamela said. "Upstairs bathroom's too far from you. I'm not asking you to listen while I sleep. I won't hear much over my snoring." Pamela took her evening medication and walked one last time from the kitchen to the bedroom. Arthur stayed far enough back that she did not feel followed. The bedroom had been searched too. Her jewelry box sat open on the dresser. Nothing valuable had been there, but Rachel knew that. The few pieces worth selling were locked at the bank. Pamela closed the lid. Her father's framed photograph remained beside the bed. Howard stood in front of the smokehouse wearing a clean white apron over work clothes. Arthur was partly visible at the edge, holding a tray and laughing at something outside the frame. Pamela turned the photograph face down. She did not want Howard watching while she struggled into bed. Sleep came in short pieces. The furnace clicked on and off. Each time floorboards creaked in the parlor, she remembered Arthur was there and relaxed again. At 5 the next morning, she smelled coffee. Arthur brought her a mug after she had washed and dressed. He had already moved the folding auction table out of the parlor and returned the furniture to its proper places. "Don't do too much before breakfast," she said. "That advice seems useful for both of us." They had less than 7 hours before the pickup pause expired. Pamela called the auction company as soon as the office opened. A woman in the collections department found the file. "We have paid buyers scheduled from noon until 4, the woman said. "Your daughter authorized release. My daughter no longer controls access to the house. That doesn't change completed sales." "I understand. I'm not keeping anything that was properly listed and paid for." Arthur looked at her across the table. He had expected a fight over every object. Pamela continued. "I want a copy of the final lot sheets, not the advertising inventory. The sheets showing exactly what each buyer paid for. The woman sent them by email. There were 46 completed lots. 31 remained on the property." Pamela and Arthur compared the final sheets with their notebook. The hay wagon, tool cabinet, freezer units, drill press, and hog gates had all been sold. So had the cedar chest, although the buyer hadn't collected it. The missing kitchen chair, clock, kettle, knives, and blanket were not part of any paid lot. "Those items don't leave," Pamela said. "I can add a notice for the pickup staff. No staff enter my house. Arthur will meet the buyers in the yard. He'll release only the numbered lots on your final sheets." The woman hesitated. "Mrs. Holt, the winning bidder for the real property, has inspection rights during the closing period. That isn't today's equipment pickup." "No, then we're discussing separate things." The woman agreed to Pamela's plan and sent written confirmation. Arthur printed 2 copies at the small library in town. One went on the back door. He carried the other on a clipboard. At 11:45, the first truck arrived. Pamela watched from the kitchen window while Arthur checked the driver's receipt. He released a portable welder and nothing else. The driver pointed at a grinder sitting beside it. Arthur checked the lot sheet, shook his head, and rolled the grinder back into the shed. The next buyer wanted the cedar chest. Arthur brought it downstairs, opened it, and showed that the blankets had been removed. Pamela had emptied them herself, moving each one slowly from the chest to the parlor sofa. By 3, the paid equipment was gone. Several buyers complained about the delay. One tried to take a fuel can that had been photographed beside a tractor. Arthur stopped him at the gate. Every numbered lot left. Nothing else did. Pamela disliked seeing the yard emptied, but she had made a decision before the first truck arrived. The buyers had paid in good faith. Punishing them would not restore what Rachel had done. It would only make more people part of the injury. At 4, Arthur shut the machine shed and locked the new chain Pamela had asked him to buy. He placed the key in her hand. That's the last of them. The grinder? Still there. The cream separator? Still there. The cider press? Still there. The answer eased something in her. She had not recovered the farm, but she had stopped its contents from becoming whatever a stranger could fit onto a trailer. The auction company called before closing for the day. "There's another issue," the woman said. "The equipment proceeds were applied in part to auction fees and property preparation costs. The balance is being held until the real estate closing." "Held where? In our client account. Under whose instruction?" "Rachel Holt's, acting under your power of attorney." Pamela looked at the signed bidder agreement on the table. "What happens if I revoke that authority today?" "You would control future instructions once we receive notice. It would not automatically cancel actions already taken. Send me your notice requirements." The woman emailed them. Pamela read the page. The company wanted a signed written revocation and proof that Rachel had received it. The bank and any other business relying on the power of attorney would need separate notice. Rachel called while Pamela was still reading. "The auction office says you've locked everyone out. I supervise pickup. You made a 72-year-old man check receipts in the cold. Arthur is 72, and I offered to pay him." "Out of what?" "They're holding the sale money." Pamela said nothing. Rachel heard the answer in the silence. "You didn't know that?" "No, I was keeping it together until closing. That money has to cover the auction bill, the overdue propane delivery, the property taxes, and whatever insurance doesn't cover from your surgery. You could have told me. I did tell you there was no money. That isn't the same as telling me where you put mine." Rachel lowered her voice. "If you revoke the power of attorney now, you'll have to handle all of it. Every call, every bill, every closing question. You can't drive for weeks." Pamela looked at the walker beside her chair. Her daughter was using the truth again. Pamela would need rides. She would need someone to carry groceries and lift laundry. Even opening the low file drawer remained impossible. None of that required Rachel to own the decisions. "I'll handle it," Pamela said. "How?" "I'm still working that out. That isn't a plan. It's enough for today. Craig's title review has already started. If you frighten him off, the farm goes back on the market, and we may owe fees without a buyer. I didn't hire the auction company. You signed the power of attorney." "Yes. That was my mistake." Rachel went quiet. Pamela had apologized to Rachel many times, usually to end an argument. This was different. She was not apologizing for making Rachel's life difficult. She was naming the place where she had surrendered judgment. "I'm revoking it," Pamela said. "Don't do this while you're angry. I should have limited it before surgery. I didn't. I'm correcting that now. You're punishing me. I'm ending your authority. Those are not the same thing." Rachel's breathing sharpened. "Who put this in your head?" "Arthur, no. You weren't talking like this before. Before, I needed you to take me to the hospital." The sentence hurt both of them. Rachel ended the call without saying goodbye. Arthur returned from checking the smokehouse roof. He stamped mud from his boots and placed a weather report beside Pamela. Rain was expected the following evening, followed by wet snow. "The loose section won't hold much weight," he said. "How bad? I can brace it from inside if we get the door open. From outside, I'd need to strip part of the metal. We don't have the key." "I know." Pamela called the credit union. A notary could come to the house before 6. While they waited, she wrote a short revocation of the financial power of attorney. She used plain words. Rachel could no longer sign, direct money, enter contracts, or act for Pamela in financial matters. The notary arrived carrying a seal and a narrow briefcase. She checked Pamela's identification, watched her sign, stamped the page, and left after 12 minutes. Arthur scanned the revocation and sent it to the auction company, the bank, and Rachel. Delivery confirmations appeared one by one. The last came from Rachel's email, read at 6:23. Pamela rested her hand on the table. Rachel no longer had authority to direct another payment, release another object, or sign another instruction in her mother's name. The boundary held. Then the auction company replied with the revised closing contact sheet. All questions would now come directly to Pamela. The property inspection was scheduled for the following morning, and Craig Brewer had requested access to every building listed in the sale. That included the smokehouse. Arthur looked toward the dark yard. "He'll expect the door opened. So do I." Rain tapped once against the kitchen window, then again. Pamela took the new machine shed key from her pocket and set it beside the photograph of the missing brass one. "Before Craig gets here," she said, "we find out what Rachel was trying to open." Arthur put on his coat. "You're staying inside. I can stand under the porch roof. You can stand inside by the window. If I can't see what you're doing, you'll make the opening worse. I helped build it. You helped Dad lay brick. You did not do the roof." Arthur pointed at the walker. "And you're not doing either one today." They compromised. Pamela stood in the mudroom doorway while Arthur carried a ladder toward the smokehouse. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat. The building sat 30 yards behind the farmhouse, close enough that Pamela could smell the wet stone around its foundation. The red brick had faded unevenly. Moss filled several mortar joints on the north wall. The roof dipped at the rear corner, where a timber brace had shifted away from the wall. Arthur climbed 3 rungs and pressed against the loose sheet of metal. "Don't lift it," Pamela called. "I'm checking it. You're lifting. I can't check underneath without lifting. Then come down and get a pry bar." Arthur looked back at her. That would also involve lifting, with control. He climbed down and returned to the woodshed. Pamela watched him choose a flat bar instead of the long crowbar. Howard had always said Arthur approached repair work as though the building had insulted him personally. Rain gathered along Pamela's hairline. Her right leg began to tremble. "Go inside," Arthur said. "I'm fine. You're leaning on the door. I'm using the frame. You're leaving fingerprints in it." Pamela stepped back into the mudroom, but kept the door open. Arthur raised the metal roofing just enough to see beneath it. The decking had split along one edge. The main rafter looked sound, but the short support below it had slipped. "It needs a post from the floor," he said. "Can you reach it from outside?" "Not safely." The smokehouse door remained locked. The keyway scratches shone brighter now that the surface was wet. Arthur circled the building and stopped at a low wooden vent near the rear wall. "I forgot about this." Pamela moved closer to the doorway. "The draft opening? Howard enlarged it after we smoked those shoulders too hot. That was your fire. That has never been proven." The vent was covered by a slatted oak panel held with 4 screws. Arthur removed them carefully and lifted the panel free. The opening was too small for his shoulders, but large enough for an arm. "Get my phone," he said. Pamela had it in the pocket of her robe. She placed it on the end of a broom handle, secured it with 2 rubber bands, and handed it to him when he came back. Arthur switched on the camera light and pushed it through the opening. The phone showed only dust at first. Then he turned the handle. The inside of the smokehouse appeared in pieces. A stone floor, the bottom of the curing racks, a workbench along the far wall. White mineral streaks ran down the bricks where the roof had leaked. The fallen support rested at an angle beneath the lowest rafter. "Move left," Pamela said. "I am moving left. Your other left." The view shifted toward the door. Its inner face was intact. Several tools still hung on the wall, including a handsaw and 2 iron hooks. "The knives aren't there," Pamela said. "Howard never left the good knives out there. They were in the kitchen." Arthur angled the phone upward. The main beams were dark from years of smoke, but none had broken. One section of ceiling boards had lifted, allowing water to run behind them. "That building isn't ready to fall," Pamela said. "No. What would it take? 2 temporary posts now. New decking along the rear edge. Replace the slip support, then reset the metal. How much rot? Can't tell without getting inside. Enough to justify tearing it down?" Arthur looked at her through the rain. "Not from what I can see." That was the useful answer Pamela needed. Rachel's description had turned neglect into hopelessness. The camera showed damage, but damage could be measured and repaired. Headlights turned into the drive. A dark utility vehicle stopped near the barn. Craig Brewer stepped out wearing work boots and a rain jacket. He carried a clipboard, but no briefcase. "You're early," Pamela said when he approached the porch. "Forecast said the rain would get heavier. It will." Craig looked toward the smokehouse. Arthur still knelt beside the open vent. "Are you dismantling anything?" "Inspecting it." "The agreement limits changes before closing. Removing 4 screws from a vent isn't a substantial change." "No, it isn't." Craig said it without argument, which made Pamela trust him slightly more than if he had tried to sound friendly. Arthur returned with the phone. Rainwater ran from his sleeves. "Main beams are standing," he said. "Rear support slipped. Roof edge needs work." Craig held out his hand for the phone. Arthur looked at Pamela first. She nodded. Craig studied the images. He enlarged one, showing the curing racks. "Those original?" he asked. "Dad built them," Pamela said. "They look like white oak." "They are." Craig handed the phone back. "I'd still need inside access. I don't have the key." "Your daughter said keys would be available." "My daughter no longer acts for me." His face showed that the auction company had already informed him. "I'm here to inspect," he said. "I'm not here to get between you two." "You already are." "That wasn't my choice." Neither was surgery. Craig glanced at the hospital band visible above Pamela's collar. "We can do the house first." Pamela let him enter because the agreement required reasonable inspection. Arthur stayed beside her. Craig checked the cellar, electrical panel, plumbing, and windows. He took photographs and wrote short notes. He did not behave like a man admiring a future home. He measured door widths in the machine shed. He photographed the turning area beside the barn. In the kitchen, he looked through the back window toward the smokehouse twice. Pamela noticed. "What do you plan to do with the land?" she asked. "Depends on condition." "That isn't an answer. It's the answer I have today." "Are you farming it?" "I may continue the lease on the surrounding acreage." "And the house?" "Not sure." He moved to the next window. "You bid without knowing?" "I knew enough to bid." Pamela understood that he wasn't ready to tell her what enough meant. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later. She came through the back door using her old key. The new lock stopped her. Pamela watched through the window as Rachel tried the key again, harder. Arthur opened the door but remained in the doorway. "You changed the locks?" Rachel asked. "Yes," Pamela said. "You could have told me. You received the revocation." "That didn't say I couldn't visit." "You can visit after you call." Rachel saw Craig in the parlor and lowered her voice. "Why is Arthur guarding the door? He opened it for you." "Am I allowed inside?" Pamela considered the question. It was the first time Rachel had asked for permission to enter the farmhouse since she was grown. "Yes." Rachel stepped in, wiped her shoes, and looked around. The folding table was gone. The auction papers had been stacked on one end of the kitchen table. Pamela's medicine schedule lay beside them. "What are you doing out of bed?" Rachel asked. "Walking? In the rain?" "I stayed under the roof." Arthur made a small sound that could have been a cough. Rachel noticed the open vent on the smokehouse. "What did you do?" "We inspected the roof." "You cannot start repairs during closing." "I haven't started." "Craig?" Craig came into the kitchen. The vent cover was removed for a camera inspection. "There's no change to the building." Rachel looked relieved until he added, "The structure may be in better condition than the listing suggested." Pamela saw the relief leave. Rachel turned to Arthur. "You told the auctioneer that roof was unsafe." "I said nobody should enter until it was supported." "You said the whole rear corner might come down." "It might if the slipped brace isn't replaced." "That sounds unsafe to me." "Unsafe isn't the same as worthless." Craig watched them without speaking. Rachel noticed his attention and drew her cardigan closed. "We're discussing a liability," she said. "It was priced that way." "At $12,000, Pamela said. That was the estimated salvage value. "Based on whose inspection?" "The auction company's." "Did they go inside?" "The door was locked." "Then they didn't inspect it." Rachel reached for the coffee pot, found it empty, and set it down too hard. Mom, please think about what you're doing. If you start rebuilding out there, Craig can object that the property changed after his bid. If you delay inspection, he can object to that too. We need this closing completed before bills pile up. We? You know what I mean. I don't anymore. Craig put his clipboard under his arm. I can return when there's access. How long can you wait? Pamela asked. The inspection period ends in 6 days. Closing is later. 6 days gave her less time than she expected. Rachel spoke quickly. We'll have a locksmith open it. No, Pamela said. Then how do you expect to get inside? With the key. The key is gone. It disappeared while you were preparing the auction. Rachel's gaze shifted to the laptop. Pamela opened the saved photograph and turned the screen. The brass key hung clearly on the bottom hook. This was taken the first morning your photographer came. Rachel stared at it. Craig stepped closer, but said nothing. The key was there, Pamela said. By auction day, it wasn't. I told you, I don't know where it is. Who handled the keys during setup? Me, the auctioneer, 2 crew members. Craig had them for 10 minutes. After the auction, Craig said, that photograph was taken days earlier. Rachel's face colored. I wasn't accusing you. You were including me. Arthur set his phone beside the laptop. On its screen was the close photograph of the scratched lock. Someone tried to use a key, he said. Recently, Rachel folded her arms. Then call the auction company. I cannot answer for every person who walked through here. You can answer for yourself, Pamela said. Did you remove that brass key? No. Again, the word came too quickly. Rachel picked up her handbag. This is exactly why I wanted the sale handled while you recovered. You turn every problem into a test of loyalty. She left without waiting for permission. The new lock clicked behind her. Craig watched her cross the yard. If that roof opens further, water could damage more than the support. I know. I can't inspect the locked building, and I can't accept a description based on a phone through a vent. I know that too. He gave Pamela until the end of the inspection period, then drove away. The rain grew heavier after dark. Water began dripping from the mudroom ceiling, where the porch roof joined the house. Arthur placed a pan beneath it. Pamela sat at the table with her checkbook and the building supply estimate Arthur had made. 2 posts, braces, roof decking, screws, flashing, and enough metal to replace the damaged edge would take much of what remained in her savings after the hospital deposit. If we buy it, Arthur said, we still need a way through that door. We buy it. That doesn't solve the lock. No. It keeps the materials ready when we do. She wrote the check slowly. Her hand remained steady. Arthur looked again at the photograph of Howard beside the smokehouse. There's one person left who might remember why he was so particular about that key. Pamela knew who he meant. Glenda had been Howard's younger sister, the keeper of family details nobody else thought important until they were needed. Pamela reached for the phone. Call her, she said. Arthur dialed and put the phone on speaker. Glenda answered in a voice thick with sleep. If this is about the weather, I already brought my plants in. It's Pamela. The sleep left her voice. What's wrong? Pamela explained only what Glenda needed to know. The smokehouse key was missing. Someone had tried the lock. The farm was under an auction agreement, and the buyer needed access within 6 days. Glenda interrupted twice. First to ask whether Pamela was still in the hospital, then to ask whether Rachel had truly arranged the auction without waiting for her mother to wake. When Pamela said yes, Glenda went quiet. What do you remember about Dad's key? Pamela asked. It was brass, I know that. He wore it on a cord when he worked. After he stopped curing meat, he kept it in the mudroom. I remember. Did it open anything besides the door? Glenda took time to answer. Howard never liked one key doing only one job. Arthur and Pamela looked at each other. What does that mean? Pamela asked. It means your father bought locks in pairs, house and cellar, machine shed and fuel cabinet. He said matching locks saved a man from carrying a jailer's ring. Did the smokehouse key have a pair? I don't know. Pamela heard a cupboard open on Glenda's end, then running water. There was something else, Glenda said. I haven't thought about it in years. What? I need to see the building. Tonight, I'm not driving County Road B in this rain. I'll come after breakfast. Can't you tell me now? I can tell you that I signed something for Howard. I can't tell you what it means without looking at the place. What did you sign? Not sign. Witness. It was a deed. Pamela stopped breathing for a second. To the farm? No. That's why I need to see it. It had the house on a little map, and the smokehouse was marked too. When was this? Years before he died. A long time before. Why didn't you tell me? I thought you knew. Pamela pressed her palm against the table. I didn't. Howard had your name on the paper. I remember that much. Arthur pulled the bitter agreement closer. What did the deed do? Pamela asked. I didn't read every line. Your father told me where to sign, and I signed. That was how Howard did things. Did he keep it? He put it in a brown envelope. After that, I don't know. Pamela asked 3 more questions. Glenda could not say how many acres were described, whether another witness had been present, or where Howard had taken the envelope. I'll come in the morning, she repeated. Don't let anybody tear into that building before I get there. After the call, rain drummed steadily on the farmhouse roof. Arthur tapped the property description in the bitter agreement. This treats everything as one parcel. A deed with my name on it doesn't prove anything if we don't have it. No. And Glenda may remember it wrong. She might. Neither of them believed she had invented the memory. Glenda forgot where she set her glasses, but she remembered paper. She'd spent years keeping books for a hardware store and could still identify an old invoice by the color of its carbon copy. Pamela picked up the supply estimate. If Dad separated the house and smokehouse, the roof matters more than it did an hour ago. It mattered before. Now it may be sitting on the proof that Rachel couldn't auction it. Arthur rubbed the side of his face. We still can't get inside. We call a locksmith. You said not to. I said I didn't want Rachel calling one and changing things without me. I'll be standing there. The locksmith came shortly after 9 the next morning. He was a broad man in a brown work coat who listened while Pamela gave one precise instruction. Open the outer door without drilling the cylinder. Do not open or remove any other lock inside. He examined the scratches around the keyway. Someone worked at this already, he said. With the right key? Could have been the right key used badly. Could have been 3 wrong ones. Hard to tell. Can you open it? Yes. Craig's inspection rights did not begin until 10. Pamela wanted the door open before he arrived. She also wanted Glenda there. At 9:20, Glenda's car came up the drive. She parked beside Arthur's truck and climbed out wearing rubber boots and Howard's old green raincoat. The coat reached nearly to her knees. Pamela recognized the repaired cuff. You kept that? She asked. Howard left it in my car. I kept telling him to take it back. He's been gone 8 years. I gave him time. Glenda hugged Pamela carefully, one arm around her shoulders without touching her back. Then she looked toward the locksmith. That the original cylinder? Yes. Good. Don't let him replace it. Pamela gave her a sharp look. Why? Because Howard fitted it. That isn't an answer. It's the one I have. The locksmith used 2 slim tools and a small tension bar. The work took less than 5 minutes. There was no dramatic click, only a slight movement in his wrist. The lock turned. Arthur opened the door a few inches, then stopped when a piece of loose ceiling board shifted inside. Everybody back. The locksmith collected his tools and gave Pamela the bill. Opening one door cost more than she expected. She paid him from the money left in her checking account. He handed her the unlocked cylinder keyway without replacing anything, wished her luck, and drove away. Arthur pushed the door with a long pole. It opened inward until it met the fallen roof support. Cold smoke smell came through the gap. It was faint after so many unused years, but still distinct. Hickory, salt, damp brick, and the sour edge of old grease. Pamela gripped the walker. For a moment she was back beside Howard, watching him rub pepper into pork shoulders, while Arthur complained that the radio only worked when somebody stood near the west wall. Then water struck the stone floor inside, bringing her back. Can you get through? She asked. Arthur turned sideways and eased past the door. He did not touch the fallen support. He inspected the floor, beams, and roof from below, calling out what he saw. The main rafters solid, one split board, mortars washed out above the vent. Rear wall, still plumb, foundation, dry along this side. Glenda stood beside Pamela under the porch of the building. She studied the front wall, then walked 10 paces toward the farmhouse. What are you doing? Pamela asked. Remembering? Glenda turned and faced the smokehouse again. The map started at the road. It came past the well, around the house, then behind this wall. How far? I don't know. There were measurements written along the lines. Was the barn inside? I don't think so. The machine shed? No. That wasn't on the drawing. Arthur came back to the doorway. You sure it was a deed? Yes. What did Howard say? Glenda looked at the roof, as if the words might still be caught there. He said the house needed the smokehouse, and the smokehouse needed enough ground to work. He said nobody should split them, because the place would become useless in pieces. Pamela remembered Howard arguing with a surveyor near the well in the late 90s. She had assumed they were marking the lease boundary. He had never explained it, and she had not asked. Howard considered questions a form of supervision. Did he say he was giving it to me? Pamela asked. He said he was putting your name where it belonged. That sounds like him, but it doesn't tell me anything. It told me enough to witness it. Arthur returned inside. He passed the phone through the doorway and photographed each wall for Pamela. The curing racks filled the center. A brick firebox stood near the rear. Along the west wall was the old steel curing compartment Howard used for salt, thermometers, account books, and anything he wanted protected from heat and mice. Its door was closed. Pamela enlarged the image. The compartment had a small brass-faced lock. Glenda leaned over the screen. I remember that cabinet. It isn't a cabinet, Arthur said. Howard built it into the wall. Did he keep papers in it? Receipts, cure logs, sometimes cash until Pam made him stop. Pamela looked toward the open smokehouse door. The exterior lock had been picked, but the key remained missing. If Howard bought locks in pairs, the brass key might fit the steel compartment. It was still only a possibility. Don't touch that lock, she said. Arthur nodded. The lumber truck arrived while they were still inspecting. It carried posts, plywood, flashing, and roofing metal. The driver needed payment before unloading. Pamela had already written the check. Seeing the total again made her hesitate. The hospital would send another bill. Propane was due. If the deed Glenda remembered had later been replaced, revoked, or recorded differently, Pamela would be spending her remaining savings on a building included in someone else's purchase. Arthur saw the hesitation. We can refuse delivery. And let the roof open tonight? We can tarp it. In this wind? No. Pamela signed. The driver unloaded the materials beside the woodshed. Her savings became a stack of lumber under wet canvas. They began with the temporary posts. Arthur needed someone inside to hold the first brace level while he wedged it beneath the rafter. Glenda volunteered. I can hold a board. You can hold it, Arthur said. But you cannot stand under that beam. Then tell me where to stand. Pamela directed them from the doorway. The post needed to sit on a flat stone near the back wall. Arthur cut it slightly long, angled it into place, then tapped the bottom with a mallet. The post slipped. Glenda stepped clear. Arthur caught it against his shoulder. Pamela moved without thinking. She took one step over the threshold and reached for the loose brace. Pain went through her back and down her leg so sharply that her hand opened. Arthur dropped the mallet. Don't move. I'm not. Her right foot had gone numb. Glenda brought the walker through the doorway. Arthur guided Pamela backward until she reached it. The numbness eased after a minute, but the pain remained. You're done, Arthur said. We aren't. You are. Pamela wanted to argue. Instead, she sat on an upturned crate beneath the porch while Arthur and Glenda reset the post. The cost of one quick movement followed her into the afternoon. She could not stand again without help. The second post went in cleanly. Arthur secured both with cross braces. By dusk, the roof no longer sagged when the wind pressed against it. One danger had been contained. Inside the farmhouse, Glenda wrote down everything she remembered about the deed. She included the brown envelope, Howard's signature, Pamela's name, the boundary drawing, and the smokehouse marked within it. At the bottom, she signed and dated the page. This isn't the deed, Pamela said. I know. It doesn't prove ownership. I know that too. But you'll say this again if someone asks? I'll say exactly what I remember, no more and no less. Pamela folded the page and placed it in the cash box. That morning, her goal had been to keep the smokehouse standing until the auction dispute ended. Now standing wasn't enough. Stopping the sale wasn't enough either. If Howard had drawn a boundary around the farmhouse and smokehouse, then Pamela needed to find the paper and learn whether he had created a separate homestead. Her back throbbed with every breath. The bank balance was low. Craig's inspection window continued to close. Pamela looked through the rain-dark window at the braced roof and the locked steel door inside. "We're not just protecting that building now," she said. "We're finding out what Dad meant to leave in my hands." Arthur closed the cash box. "Then we need to do 3 things," he said. "Make the roof safe, learn what Craig actually wants, and find that key. 4 things." "What's the 4th? Stop working for free." Arthur stared at her. "This is not the time. It's exactly the time. You've spent 3 days here. You bought wire and a chain with your own money. You drove to the library twice. You're counting miles now? I'm hiring you." "With what?" "The equipment money when it's released. That money has bills against it. So does your time." Glenda pushed her chair back. "Take the offer, Arthur. She'll wear herself out trying to repay favors she never asked for." Arthur looked from one woman to the other. "Howard never paid me every time I helped him. Dad gave you half the meat. He gave me the pieces he overcured. He also used your grinder for 30 years. That was between us. This is between you and me." Pamela wrote a simple agreement in the notebook. Arthur would be paid by the hour for repair work. Materials and mileage would be separate. If the auction company delayed the equipment balance, payment would wait, but the amount would still be owed. Arthur read it. "You left out meals. You eat whether you work or not. Not like this." Glenda signed as a witness before Arthur could argue further. That changed the work. Arthur was still her friend, but he was no longer rescuing her. Pamela could direct the repairs without apologizing every time he lifted something. The next morning, she called Craig. He answered from his truck. She could hear a turn signal clicking. "I want to finish your inspection," Pamela said. "So do I." "The outer door is open. The roof is temporarily braced. You changed the property. I prevented weather damage. That may be reasonable, but the auction company needs a record." Arthur photographed before and after. Receipts are in a folder. Craig's turn signal stopped. "What are you asking me?" "Come inspect the smokehouse tomorrow. Tell me what you intended to do with it." "I told you, my plans depend on condition." "That answer expired when you looked at those curing racks longer than you looked at my barn." Craig gave a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because she had caught him. "I have retailers who still ask about Holt-cured hams," he said. Pamela sat straighter. "Dad stopped selling to stores years ago. The stores didn't stop asking. Why didn't you say that at the auction?" "Because I was bidding." "So the smokehouse was part of the value. It was part of my interest." "How much?" "I'm not valuing it over the phone. You let Rachel call it a liability. I didn't hire the auctioneer. You didn't correct him." Craig's voice hardened slightly. "Mrs. Holt, bidders do not raise the seller's price for her." He was right. Pamela did not like it, but she respected the plainness. "What would make it useful to you?" she asked. "Safe structure, clean work surfaces, reliable temperature and airflow, water that passes inspection, a process somebody can repeat. Dad's process can be repeated. By whom? Arthur knows it. So do I." Craig paused. "Your daughter said it hadn't operated since Howard died. Rachel never worked a full curing season. That doesn't answer me." "Yes, I know the method." Pamela had helped with every winter run until Howard's hands became too stiff to trim meat. She knew how long he salted by weight when he changed the brine and how he opened the upper vent when the air turned damp. She had done the work without putting her name on the labels. Howard had been the name customers remembered. "What are you proposing?" Craig asked. "That depends on what Glenda remembers." "About what?" "A boundary." Pamela told him only that Howard may have signed a deed involving the homestead and smokehouse. She did not claim ownership she could not yet prove. Craig stopped moving. The road noise disappeared. If that building sits on land outside the auction parcel, title review needs to know now. "I'm aware. Do you have the deed?" "No." "Recorded copy?" "Not yet." "Survey?" "No." "Then you have a witness's memory." "Yes." "That's not enough to change a purchase." "I didn't ask you to change it today. I asked you to inspect the building." Craig was silent for a moment. "If you establish separate ownership, I'll consider revising the purchase to the surrounding acreage. And the smokehouse? If it can operate safely, we can discuss product. On my terms. We haven't discussed terms. That one comes first." Craig agreed to return at 9 the following morning. After the call, Pamela did not ask whether Arthur thought she had handled it well. She handed him the repair list. They spent the day on the rear roof. Arthur removed the damaged metal and split decking. Pamela sat at a folding table beneath the smokehouse overhang. recording each board and fastener as it came off. The work exposed less rot than Arthur feared. The slip support had failed because an old iron fastener rusted through, not because the timber had softened. "There's your answer," he said, holding up the broken fastener. One bad connection can drop a roof." Pamela wrote it down with the rest. Arthur fitted the new support beside the old one. He replaced the split decking and reset the roofing metal with new screws. By late afternoon, the rear edge ran straight. Pamela wanted to climb the ladder and inspect it herself. Her right foot still tingled from the previous day, so she stayed on the ground. It cost her something to remain seated while another person did work she understood. She kept her hands busy instead. She cleaned Howard's old thermometers at the table, sorted sound hooks from rusted ones, and made a list of surfaces that could be removed for washing. Glenda returned with lunch and a paper bag of clean rags. "I've been thinking about the deed," she said. "Did you remember where he put it?" "No. I remember the envelope had a metal clasp. That helps very little, I know. Anything written on it? Your name, maybe. Or the road number." Pamela did not press her. Memory worsened when people pushed at it from both sides. Glenda entered the smokehouse with Arthur and stood near the steel compartment. She did not touch the lock. "This was here when I witnessed the paper," she said. "You're certain?" Pamela asked. "Yes." Howard leaned against it while he explained the boundary. "Did he put the envelope inside?" "I left before he put it anywhere. It was another useful limit." Glenda could confirm the compartment existed, but not that it contained the deed. Arthur examined the brass-faced lock without inserting a tool. Fresh scratches marked its rim, too. "Same as outside?" Pamela asked. "Similar? Recent? Some are." Someone with the brass key may have opened the outer door, entered, then tried the steel compartment, or someone may have used the wrong key on both locks. The marks still did not say who. At 4, Pamela called the auction company and reported the stabilization work. She emailed Arthur's photographs, the material receipts, and his written description of the failed fastener. The company acknowledged the repair as emergency preservation rather than an alteration. Craig could not use it as a reason to object. The strategy had worked once. Pamela had protected the smokehouse and complied with the agreement at the same time. Rachel learned within an hour. Her message said, "You hired Arthur and filed repairs without talking to me?" Pamela read it and set the phone face down. A second message came. "If you're claiming part of the farm wasn't in the auction, you're putting every dollar at risk." Pamela still did not answer. Rachel called twice. Pamela let both calls go to voicemail. She was no longer trying to persuade her daughter that the smokehouse deserved care. Rachel would either respect the boundary or meet it. That evening, Arthur removed one of the old curing racks for cleaning. The wood was black with smoke, but solid beneath it. Pamela washed a small section with hot water and a stiff brush. Golden oak appeared under the residue. She ran her thumb along the grain. "Dad cut this from the north lot," she said. "I hauled it," Arthur said. "He picked the heaviest trees." "You complained for a month." "I'm still complaining." Before dark, Arthur rebuilt the firebox door latch. It was the first part of the smokehouse returned to working order, rather than merely protected. The following morning, Craig arrived carrying a moisture meter, a flashlight, and clean coveralls. He inspected the repaired roof, checked the posts, and entered the smokehouse. Pamela watched from the doorway while he tested brick joints and measured the damp section of wall. He examined the racks, firebox, upper vents, and steel compartment. "What's in there?" he asked. "We don't know. Can it be opened?" "Not without the missing key." He did not ask to force it. Arthur lit a small test fire in the firebox. No meat was inside, only dry hickory and a pan of water. He opened the lower draft while Pamela directed him from the doorway. "Halfway," she said, "not all the way." The smoke rose too slowly at first. Arthur adjusted the upper vent. A gray thread moved across the ceiling, found the flue, and disappeared. Craig stood near the center with the flashlight off. "Close the lower draft one finger," Pamela said. Arthur did. The smoke settled into an even movement through the racks. No smoke pushed back through the door. No new water entered at the repaired roof edge. For the first time in years, the building drew properly. Craig stepped outside and watched warm smoke rise above the wet roof. "The structure can be made safe," he said. "That's not the same as saying you want product." "No, but it's the first requirement. If I prove the homestead is separate, I'll revise my bid to exclude it, assuming the boundary holds. If you complete the rehabilitation, I'll discuss a purchase agreement for cured products. How long? That depends on volume. How much? That depends on product. Pamela almost told him to return when he had answers. Instead, she gave him a new objective. Bring a written outline before the inspection period ends. What you need, what you'll test, and what you're willing to commit if I meet it. Craig nodded. Fair. His agreement was not a contract, but it was visible respect for work Rachel had dismissed. The Smokehouse now had a possible customer, and Pamela had made him ask for her process instead of assuming he could buy the building with the land. As Craig left, another car pulled into the drive. Rachel parked behind him, blocking the exit. She got out holding a copy of Pamela's repair notice and Glenda's handwritten statement. Pamela had sent the first to the auction company. She had not sent the second to anyone. Rachel raised the statement where they could all see it. If this is your plan, she said, we're going to talk about where you found it. Craig looked at Pamela. That statement wasn't in the repair file. No. Rachel lowered the page. Glenda sent it to me. Pamela took out her phone and called. Glenda answered at once. Is Rachel there? She's standing in my drive with your statement. I gave her a copy. Why? She called last night. She said she needed to understand what I remembered before you caused trouble with the closing. Rachel opened her mouth, but Pamela raised one hand. Did you tell her where the deed is? I don't know where it is. Did you tell her about the steel compartment? Yes. Arthur turned toward the smokehouse. Rachel saw the movement. I have not touched that building. Pamela kept speaking to Glenda. Why didn't you tell me Rachel called? I thought I was helping both of you speak about the same facts. You sent her something from my cash box. I wrote the statement. I didn't think it belonged only to you. Glenda sounded wounded, but Pamela could not repair that wound, while Rachel stood in the yard using the page as a weapon. You should have told me, Pamela said. Yes, I should have. Pamela ended the call. Rachel stepped closer. You've involved Craig, the auction company, Arthur, and Glenda, but I'm wrong for asking what's happening. You didn't ask me. You stopped answering. I stopped asking your permission. Craig moved toward his vehicle. I'll come back another time. Rachel remained behind it. No, you should hear this. My mother had major surgery less than a week ago. She's taking pain medication. Glenda remembers a paper from almost 30 years ago, but can't say what it did or where it went. Arthur is rebuilding a structure that was sold as part of the farm. Now they're talking about a separate boundary nobody has seen. I've heard enough, Craig said. Have you? Because yesterday she was ready to let the auction finish. Today she thinks there may be a hidden deed. Pamela felt the words reach Craig, not because Rachel had proved anything, but because she had put doubt around Pamela's judgment. Craig looked at Pamela. Are you taking medication now? As prescribed, does it affect your decisions? No. Rachel gave a small, disbelieving breath. Pamela looked directly at Craig. If you believe I'm confused, say it. I believe the ownership question needs proof. That's what I told you. It also needs to go through the auction company. I can't negotiate around a disputed tract in the yard. You were willing to bring an outline. I was willing to discuss one. Rachel held out the statement. Read this before you decide what you were willing to do. Craig did not take it. You need to move your car, he said. Rachel moved it, but the damage remained. Craig had seen the smokehouse draw. He had acknowledged it could be restored. Now, he had also seen Pamela's own daughter question her competence in the driveway. Before leaving, he handed Pamela a single page from his clipboard. This is my inspection list, not a product commitment. The list covered structure, water, sanitation, airflow, temperature control, and production records. When will you bring the outline? Pamela asked. When ownership is established. You said before the inspection period ends. That was before your daughter produced a dispute neither side can document. My daughter produced a copy of my witness's statement. She also produced a family conflict I don't intend to finance. Craig got into his vehicle and drove away. Rachel watched until he turned onto the county road. There, she said. That's what I was trying to prevent. You blocked his car. I tried to stop you from making promises you can't keep. I made no promise. You told a meat distributor you could produce for him when you can't stand for 20 minutes. Arthur stepped between them without making it look deliberate. That's enough. Rachel looked at him. You're being paid to agree with her. I'm being paid to repair the building, with money she doesn't have. Pamela did not need Arthur to answer. What did you do with the key? She asked. Rachel's face closed. Nothing. You knew about the steel compartment before you came here. Since last night. The key disappeared before surgery. I'm aware. Did you look for it after Glenda called? No. Why not? Because I don't believe there's a deed in that compartment. You don't know what's inside. Neither do you. Rachel held out Glenda's statement. Pamela took it. It was a photograph printed from Rachel's home printer. A dark line crossed the bottom, where the page had been folded in the cash box. Why are you fighting this so hard? Pamela asked. I'm fighting delay. Why? Because the equipment money is already being reduced by fees. Because Craig can walk if the title changes. Because your medical bills haven't all arrived. Because this farm has been eating money since Grandpa died. Dad's name was Howard. I know Grandpa's name. Then speak about him like he was a person, not the date when the income stopped. Rachel looked away first. When Grandpa died, she said, correcting herself, you told me you'd sell within a year. Pamela remembered saying it after the funeral. The farmhouse had been full of casseroles and borrowed chairs. She could not imagine sleeping there alone, so she had told Rachel the farm would go on the market when the weather improved. Then spring came. Pamela repaired fences, renewed the acreage lease, and continued living. She never told Rachel she had changed her mind. She simply allowed the year to pass. I did say that, Pamela said. You said I wouldn't have to worry about you out here. I thought selling would make you worry less. And then you stayed. Yes. You never tell me when you change the rules. You just wait for me to notice. Pamela could see the old pattern from Rachel's side. Silence had not only protected Pamela from disagreement, it had made Rachel live around decisions that were never spoken aloud. That truth still did not give her the farm. I should have told you I intended to stay, Pamela said. You should have sold when the place was worth more. That was not your decision. It becomes my decision when you expect me to clean up after it. I no longer expect that. Rachel laughed once. You say that while recovering from surgery. I need help with my body. I do not need you to replace my judgment. Rachel's eyes filled, though no tears fell. You don't get to separate those things whenever it suits you. No, I have to learn how to separate them. So do you. Rachel folded her arms against the cold. The auction company called me this morning. They shouldn't. They asked about actions taken while the power of attorney was active. They can ask. What did you tell them? That Glenda's memory is unverified and that you're threatening a boundary dispute? I haven't threatened one. You told Craig the homestead may be separate. That is not the same thing. It will be when the auction company receives this. Rachel took another paper from her bag. It was a notice prepared by the auction company after their call. If Pamela formally claimed that any portion of the advertised property was excluded from the sale, the company would suspend closing review until the claim was resolved. The held equipment proceeds would remain unavailable. Additional title and administration costs could be charged against them. If the issue was not raised before closing, the transaction would proceed according to the existing property description. Pamela read the final sentence twice. Rachel had found the strongest pressure available because Pamela herself had left it available. Say nothing, allow the sale, and perhaps the bills would be covered. Raise the boundary question, and every dollar from the equipment could remain tied up while costs grew. You asked them to prepare this, Pamela said. I asked what would happen, and then drove here to make sure I understood the price. Yes, it was honest, and that made it harder. Arthur read the notice over Pamela's shoulder. How much could the extra work cost? Rachel shook her head. They won't estimate until they know what they are reviewing. And if Craig leaves, Pamela asked, the real estate sale ends. The auction company can still deduct its contracted expenses from the equipment money. How much remains after current fees? Rachel named an amount considerably lower than Pamela expected. The yard seemed emptier after she heard it. The drill press, wagon, freezers, gates, and tools had become a balance she could not reach. If she continued, that balance might shrink further. Arthur's wages were unpaid. More roofing work remained. The propane tank needed filling. Pamela could not drive to a cheaper grocery store, lift a laundry basket, or earn money from a smokehouse that was not yet clean. Rachel stepped closer. You can still let the closing proceed. We use the equipment balance for bills. Craig takes the property. You stay with me until we find somewhere manageable. Somewhere manageable. Pamela pictured Rachel's guest room, with the exercise bike moved against the wall, her clothes in one closet, her medicine on the bathroom counter, Every meal provided, every ride arranged, every decision softened into something Rachel could manage. It would be warm. It would also be temporary forever. "What happens to the smokehouse?" Pamela asked. Rachel looked toward it. A thin line of smoke still rose from Arthur's test fire. Craig decides. That was the choice in its plainest form. Pamela could protect the money that remained by surrendering the question, or she could risk that money to learn whether Howard had already protected the place. "Give me the notice," she said. Rachel held it tighter. "Read it at least once without Arthur standing here." "I read it. You're choosing a building over your own care. I'm choosing to find out what I own. On Glenda's memory, on Dad's key, the lock marks, the boundary she witnessed, and a deed we have not found. That isn't proof. No. It's the reason to keep looking." Rachel let go of the paper. Inside the farmhouse, Pamela sat at the kitchen table while Arthur opened the laptop. The auction company's message included a form for raising a title issue. Pamela filled in only what she could support. A witness recalled a deed involving the homestead and smokehouse. The original had not yet been located. The current sale description might include land previously conveyed to Pamela. She attached Glenda's statement and the photograph of the brass key. At the bottom, a warning stated that closing and funds could be delayed. Rachel stood across the table. "If you send that, I'm done fixing this." Pamela looked at her daughter. "I understand." "I mean it." "So do I." Pamela entered her name and sent the form. The confirmation arrived a moment later. Closing review was suspended. The equipment proceeds were frozen. Craig's purchase could not be revised or completed until the boundary issue was answered. Pamela had lost the money, the buyer's conditional interest, and whatever practical help Rachel might still have offered. What remained was one missing brass key and the possibility of a paper behind a steel door. She folded the notice, placed it in the cash box, and accepted that finding the truth might cost everything the auction had left her. The next morning, the auction company asked for a conference call. Pamela took it at the kitchen table. Arthur sat nearby with the notebook. Rachel joined from somewhere quiet, but she did not greet either of them. A closing reviewer explained the situation in ordinary terms. The auction agreement could sell only what Pamela owned at the time of sale. A power of attorney did not enlarge that ownership. If an earlier valid deed conveyed a separate tract, the reviewer said, that tract could not pass under the auction agreement. Rachel spoke first. "There is no deed." "There may be," Pamela said. "A memory is not a deed." The reviewer continued. "That's correct. We need the document or a reliable recorded copy, along with its boundary description." "What if it exists but was never delivered?" Rachel asked. "That depends on the document and the facts. We cannot decide from a phone call." Pamela wrote down one phrase. "Could sell only what Pamela owned." It removed one uncertainty. If Howard's deed was real and valid, Rachel's signature could not carry the homestead into Craig's purchase. The auction company could not decide otherwise for convenience. "What happens to the surrounding acreage?" Pamela asked. "If the deed excludes only a smaller tract, the bidder may agree to revise the purchase. He may also decline if the change is material. I don't want the entire sale canceled if the surrounding land can still transfer." Rachel broke her silence. "Why not?" "Because Craig bid in good faith. Craig expected the whole farm. He expected what the auction had authority to sell. So, you're protecting him now?" "I'm not trying to punish him for your decision." The call went still. Arthur wrote something in the notebook and turned it toward Pamela. "Ask about deadline." "How long do we have to produce the deed?" Pamela asked. The inspection period had 2 days remaining. The reviewer agreed to hold a closing review at the farm on the second afternoon. If Pamela produced evidence, they would examine it. If she produced nothing, Craig would choose whether to continue, extend, or withdraw. Rachel said, "And the equipment money remains held." The reviewer ended the call after confirming that all keys and auction preparation records should be brought to the review. Rachel had been the person who gathered those materials, so she was expected to attend. "I returned the keys," Rachel said. "You returned 9, Pamela said. "Bring every other key you handled during setup." "I don't have any." "Then bring the ring you used while you were here." Rachel did not answer. After the call, Arthur went to the smokehouse. He carried a flashlight, magnifying lens, and a small mirror from Pamela's sewing room. "You're not opening anything," she reminded him. "I heard you the first 12 times." Pamela followed as far as the doorway. Her back had eased enough for short walks, but the numbness returned whenever she stood too long. Arthur inspected the outer lock first. The locksmith had turned it without damaging the cylinder. Beneath the brass rim, a small maker's mark had been stamped into the metal. He found the same mark on the steel compartment. "That proves the same company made them," Pamela said. "Nothing more." Arthur held the mirror below the compartment lock. A second mark appeared under the rim, 2 shallow letters followed by a number. He returned to the outer door and checked beneath its cylinder. "Same mark," he said. "What does it mean?" "Could be a model. Could be a key code. Could be." They called the locksmith who had opened the door. Pamela read the markings to him. "Those older cylinders were often sold in match sets," he said. "Same code usually means key to like, but I won't promise without testing the key. Could you make one from the code?" "Not reliably. That maker changed blanks years ago. I could open the compartment, but you told me not to disturb it. I still don't want it disturbed." The call ended. Arthur photographed both markings with a ruler beside them. The evidence did not reveal what the compartment held, but it confirmed that Howard had installed the locks as a pair. The missing brass key should open both. "Glenda was right," Arthur said, "about the locks. She may be right about the rest. Maybe." Pamela would not allow hope to become proof just because she needed it. They spent the afternoon preparing the smokehouse for the review. Arthur removed loose tools from the floor and secured the temporary posts. Pamela cleaned the workbench while seated on a high stool. The steel compartment remained untouched. Its door was about 3 feet wide and built flush into the west brick wall. Black smoke residue covered the upper half. Along the lower edge, the steel had stayed clean, where Howard's boots rubbed against it. Pamela remembered him sitting on a crate there, writing figures into a ledger with a pencil worn nearly to the metal. She remembered asking once why he kept paper in a building full of fire. "Because nobody thinks to look for paper where they smell smoke," he had said. At the time, she thought he meant receipts. Arthur spread clean canvas over the nearest curing rack, so any paper removed from the compartment would have a dry surface. "What if it's empty?" he asked. "Then we deal with that. What if it has the deed? We don't wave it around. Nobody handles it until it's examined." The closing reviewer had asked how Pamela planned to verify an old original. The auction company could check its own title file, but Pamela wanted someone who answered only the question of the paper itself. She called Janice Carpenter. Janice examined disputed documents for insurers, banks, and private clients. She asked Pamela to describe what might be found without claiming it existed. "Possible deed from the late 90s, Pamela said. "Original signatures, attached boundary description, recording marks if it was recorded. Condition? Unknown. It may have been stored in a steel compartment inside a smokehouse." Janice paused. "Dry smoke or damp smoke?" "Both over the years. If you find it, don't flatten folds, clean the surface, or separate attached pages. Place it on clean dry paper and let me handle it. Can you come tomorrow?" Janice named her fee. Pamela looked at the checkbook. After materials, locksmith work, and household bills, paying Janice would leave very little available cash. Arthur saw the amount she wrote in the notebook. "I can wait on my wages." "No. You already owe me. And I'll continue owing you. That makes no sense. It makes the arrangement honest." Pamela accepted Janice's fee. The examiner would arrive for the review, inspect any document produced, state what she could verify, and leave. She would not decide ownership or negotiate the sale. After the call, Arthur said, "You could put this cost on Rachel. No, she created the problem. That doesn't make every expense hers. You're being generous. No, I'm keeping the proof clean." If Pamela made the examination another weapon against Rachel, every finding would become part of their argument. She needed the paper judged for what it was, not for which woman paid. Rachel called near supper. "I spoke to Glenda," she said. Pamela waited. "She's upset with you. She had reason to be. She said you treated her like she betrayed you. I was angry. I'll speak to her. You don't get to shut people out and call it a boundary." "No." Rachel seemed unprepared for agreement. Pamela continued. "I was wrong to end the call that way. She should have told me she sent the statement, but I should not have spoken to her as though she'd stolen it. Then stop the review tomorrow. Talk to us first." "No. Why admit you're wrong if you won't change anything?" "Because an apology isn't a trade." Rachel breathed into the phone. "What do you want from me?" "Bring the keys you used during the auction. I told you I returned them. Bring your current key ring. That has my house key, office key, everything. Then keep it in your hand. What are you expecting to find? I don't know. That's not true. You think I took Grandpa's key and hid a deed. I think the key disappeared while you controlled the house. I think you know more about moving it than you've said. You're going to accuse me in front of Craig. No. I will ask you about the key if it appears. I will not call you a thief. Rachel's voice became small and hard. Arthur already thinks I am. Arthur can answer for himself. You could tell everyone I abused the power of attorney. You could make me look terrible and force the auction company to cancel everything. Pamela looked toward the nearly empty machine shed. I could say you exceeded what I intended, she said. That is true. I won't claim you committed something I cannot prove. Why not? It would help you, because I still know who you are, even when I don't accept what you did. Rachel said nothing for several seconds. Will you be here tomorrow? Pamela asked. Yes. With the key ring? Yes. It was not reconciliation. It was an agreement to stand in the same place while facts were tested. Pamela called Glenda next. I'm sorry, she said before Glenda could speak. You should have told me about Rachel, but I had no right to treat your memory as my property. Glenda exhaled. I was trying to keep the family from splitting further. I know, I made it worse. You made the truth harder to control. That may not be worse. Glenda agreed to attend the review and repeat only what she remembered. By evening, the smokehouse was ready. The outer door opened cleanly. Temporary posts held the roof. The matched codes had been photographed. Clean paper and canvas waited beside the steel compartment. Pamela placed Howard's old photograph on the workbench, not as evidence, but to remind herself whose habits had led them there. The next afternoon would permanently change what Rachel could expect from her mother. If the deed existed, Pamela would use it. She would not soften its meaning to protect Rachel from embarrassment. She would not use it to take the surrounding acreage from Craig or to accuse her daughter of more than the facts showed. The price of the leverage was plain now. Pamela might keep her home, but the old relationship, where Rachel acted and Pamela yielded to preserve peace, would not survive the door opening. Pamela turned off the smokehouse light and locked only the outer door with the temporary spare the locksmith had provided. The steel compartment remained closed, waiting for Howard's missing key, and everyone who needed to see what had opened. At 2 minutes before 2, Rachel arrived with a leather folder and a crowded ring of keys. She placed both on the kitchen table and kept one hand over the keys. I brought every auction paper I had, she said. Pamela sat in Howard's chair with the walker beside her. Arthur stood near the stove. Glenda had taken the chair across from Pamela, leaving the end of the table clear for Janice. Craig arrived next. He removed his wet boots in the mudroom without being asked and carried in a copy of his bid. Janice came last. She wore cotton gloves tucked into one coat pocket and carried a flat black case. The closing reviewer joined by speakerphone. Everyone gave their name for the record. The reviewer asked whether any deed, survey, or recorded copy had been produced since the previous call. No, Rachel said. The question had been directed to Pamela. I have not found the deed, Pamela said. The steel compartment remains closed. Rachel opened her folder. Then we need to proceed using the property description in the auction agreement. That is one possible outcome, the reviewer said. Mrs. Holt still has until the end of today's review to present evidence. We've spent almost a week on a paper nobody can locate. Glenda straightened in her chair. I saw Howard sign it. You remember seeing him sign something? I remember what he called it. You didn't read it. I read Pamela's name. Rachel turned to the speakerphone. My mother is relying on a memory that has changed every time we discuss it. First it was a deed concerning the smokehouse. Then it was a boundary around the house. Now there's supposed to be a document in a locked steel box. I never said it was in the box, Glenda replied. Arthur suggested that. I said Howard kept papers there, Arthur said. Rachel pressed her fingertips against the folder. This is exactly the problem. One person remembers part of something. Another remembers a lock. Then everybody fills in the rest. Pamela watched her daughter carefully. Rachel believed what she was saying, or enough of it to continue. She had built a version in which the auction was necessary. The smokehouse was worthless. And Pamela's resistance came from pain, fear, and other people's suggestions. In that version, Rachel had not taken control. She had carried a burden her mother refused to carry. The closing reviewer asked Rachel to explain the auction preparation. Rachel described meeting the photographer, gathering keys, marking equipment, and arranging access. She said the smokehouse remained locked throughout. "Did you remove a brass key from the mudroom?" Pamela asked. "No, you told me you didn't know." "I said I didn't know where it was. Those are different answers." Rachel looked toward the speakerphone. "I handled dozens of loose keys over several days. I don't remember one brass key." Pamela said nothing. Rachel continued. "The auctioneer inspected the exterior. He valued the smokehouse as a liability with possible salvage. Craig placed his bid with that information. Mom revoked my authority after the auction, but she cannot pretend she never gave it to me. I'm not pretending. You signed it willingly. Yes. You asked me to manage the bills. Yes. You knew the farm was losing money. Yes." Rachel's voice strengthened with every answer. "Then the reasonable thing is to complete the sale. If Craig wants to revise his purchase after closing, that's between him and the property he owns." Craig spoke from the end of the table. "I can't revise a purchase after closing to exclude land I would already own. You know what I mean? I don't." Rachel turned back to Pamela. "Sign the closing direction. Release the held money. Let this be finished." She slid a paper across the table. The direction authorized the auction company to proceed with the existing description if no deed was produced by the end of the review. Pamela looked at the signature line. Rachel mistook the silence for hesitation. "You can stay with me while we sort out where you'll go," she said. "I'm not leaving you without a place." Pamela's attention moved from the paper to Rachel's hand. The key ring lay partly beneath it. There were house keys, a small car remote, 2 office keys, and several old keys Pamela did not recognize. One key near the bottom had a long brass stem and an oval head worn smooth at one side. Pamela knew the wear before she saw the whole shape. Howard had rubbed that side with his thumb whenever he stood waiting for the smoke to settle. "The key," she said. Rachel followed her gaze. For a second, nobody moved. Then Rachel closed her fingers around the ring. "Put it on the table," Pamela said. "It's my key ring. Howard's brass key is on it." Arthur stepped closer. Glenda stood. Rachel held the ring against her chest. "I don't know which one you mean." "The long brass key, 4th from the car remote." Craig looked down. Rachel's face lost color. The closing reviewer spoke through the phone. "Ms. Holt, please place the keys where everyone can see them." Rachel set the ring on the table. Pamela reached for it, but her arm was not long enough. Arthur started to move it toward her. "No," Pamela said. "Let Rachel do it." Rachel looked at her mother. "Take off the brass key," Pamela said. The split ring resisted. Rachel worked the key around it one turn at a time. The room stayed quiet except for metal scraping against metal. When the key came free, she placed it beside Pamela's hand. "You removed it," Pamela said. Rachel sat down. "I gathered loose keys during the auction setup. You told me you didn't. I forgot it was on my ring. You tried the smokehouse lock. I tried several keys and several locks. Did this one open the outer door? I don't know. The lock was stiff. It was raining, people were asking me questions, and I stopped. Did you enter the smokehouse? No. Did you know about the steel compartment? Not until Glenda told me. Did you know what this key opens? No." Rachel looked toward Craig, then Janice, searching their faces for some sign that the distinction mattered. "I did not hide a deed," she said. "I did not know there was a deed. I put the key on my ring because auction workers kept leaving keys on counters. That is all." Pamela picked it up. The brass was warm from Rachel's hand. "Then we can test it," she said. They went outside together. Arthur walked ahead to unlock the outer door with the temporary spare. Pamela followed slowly with the walker. Rachel carried the closing paper. Glenda held Janice's black case, while Janice steadied Pamela once on the uneven path. Craig came last, leaving the farmhouse door open behind him. Inside the smokehouse, daylight entered through the upper vents. The repaired roof held straight above the temporary posts. The steel compartment waited in the west wall. Arthur switched on the work light. Pamela stopped in front of the brass-faced lock. She could not bend comfortably, so Arthur moved a solid crate beneath her and helped her sit. Rachel remained near the door. "You don't have to force it," she said. "I won't." Pamela placed the key into the lock. It entered without resistance. She turned it to the right. The mechanism moved with a deep, clean click. Rachel gripped the closing paper with both hands. Pamela pulled the steel handle. The door opened a few inches, held by an old felt seal. Arthur steadied it while she pulled again. Inside were 3 cure ledgers, a tin box, 2 wrapped thermometers, and a brown envelope with a metal clasp. Pamela's name was written across the front in Howard's square handwriting. Nobody spoke. Janice put on her cotton gloves. "Don't remove it yet," she said. "Let me photograph the position." She took photographs of the compartment, envelope, lock, and contents. Then she lifted the envelope and placed it on the clean paper waiting on the curing rack. The clasp opened without tearing. Inside was a folded document attached to a boundary description with 2 old staples. A red recording stamp crossed the top corner. An embossed seal pressed through the final page. Janice unfolded it along the existing creases. Pamela saw Howard Holt's name first. Beneath it was hers. The document conveyed to Pamela the 4-acre homestead tract at 1887 County Road B, including the farmhouse, Smokehouse, and access from the county road. The attached description traced the line Glenda remembered. It excluded the barn, machine shed, leased fields, and surrounding acreage. The recording stamp was dated in 1998. Glenda covered her mouth. "That's it," she said. "That's the paper." Janice asked everyone to step back from the rack. She examined the paper under a portable light. She checked the fibers, folds, ink, embossed seal, staples, and recording stamp. She compared the signature Glenda provided on her identification with the witness signature on the deed. Glenda leaned close enough to see but did not touch. "That's Howard's signature," she said, "and mine." Janice worked for nearly 20 minutes. Rachel stood against the brick wall, still holding the unsigned closing direction. Her eyes moved from the deed to the open compartment and then to the brass key in Pamela's hand. Craig read the boundary description from several feet away. "The smokehouse is inside the 4 acres, he said. "Yes," Janice replied. "The attached description expressly includes it." "Is the paper authentic?" Pamela asked. Janice removed her magnifying lens. The paper, ink, seal, recording stamp, and signatures are consistent with an original deed executed and recorded in 1998. I see no alteration, substitution, or added page. The boundary description was attached before recording. "Can the auction transfer those 4 acres?" Pamela asked. The closing reviewer answered through Arthur's phone. "Not under the auction description now before us. The recorded deed predates the auction and conveys that tract to Pamela Holt. It must be excluded." Rachel lowered the paper in her hands. The false version did not collapse with shouting. It simply lost the facts that held it up. The smokehouse had not been a worthless structure attached to land Rachel could sell for convenience. Howard had preserved the deed inside the building itself. The missing key had been on Rachel's ring, while she insisted no useful proof existed. Janice placed the deed in an archival sleeve and wrote a short authentication statement. She signed it, gave both to Pamela, packed her equipment, and left as agreed. Craig remained beside the curing rack. "I'm still prepared to purchase the surrounding acreage," he said, with a revised description. The auction reviewer said new papers would be prepared. Rachel looked at Pamela. "I didn't know. I believe you didn't know what the key opened. That isn't the same as believing me?" "No." Rachel's eyes settled on the open steel compartment. "What happens now?" Pamela held the deed against her chest, careful not to bend the sleeve. "The farmhouse and smokehouse stay with me," she said. "Everything else starts from that fact." Rachel looked down at the unsigned paper. "Can we talk inside?" Pamela nodded toward the farmhouse. "After we secure the deed." Arthur closed the steel compartment. Pamela locked it with Howard's key, then placed the key on her own ring. The temporary outer key remained with Arthur. Glenda walked beside Pamela on the path back. Rachel followed alone. At the kitchen table, Craig and the closing reviewer worked through the revised boundary. The reviewer explained that the original auction did not need to be abandoned. Craig could purchase the surrounding acreage, barn, and machine shed under a corrected description. The 4-acre homestead would be removed. Craig asked for the price to be adjusted. "That's reasonable," Pamela said. Rachel turned toward her. "You're agreeing to less money? The land is less. We could contest the boundary value. We could delay everything and spend more on fees. But the smokehouse is valuable to him. The smokehouse is not for sale." Rachel sat back. The closing reviewer promised corrected papers by the next morning. Craig would have time to review them and complete the purchase before the original 18-day deadline. When the call ended, he placed his inspection list beside Pamela. "I'll revise this for a production agreement," he said. "You haven't seen a finished batch." "No, I've seen the building draw, the method records in that compartment, and 2 people who understand the work. The ledgers haven't been reviewed. They don't need to be reviewed today." "What are you offering?" Craig opened his bid folder and took out a page of notes. He proposed a 5-year purchase commitment worth $240,000 in total. It would begin only after the Smokehouse passed structural and sanitation checks, and Pamela produced a test batch that met agreed standards. The commitment was not a gift. Pamela would have to buy meat, salt, wood, packaging, and insurance. She would have to maintain records and deliver on a schedule her back could tolerate. If a batch failed, Craig would not buy it. "You control the customer labels," Pamela said. "Yes, I control the process, as long as it passes inspection. No changes to cure time because a retailer is in a hurry." "Agreed." "No exclusive right to the Holt name." Craig considered that. "I need assurance you won't supply the same product to another regional distributor. You can have regional distribution rights for what you buy. You don't own the name, the smokehouse, the recipes, or local sales." Craig wrote it down. Rachel watched the negotiation with an expression Pamela recognized. She was calculating staff, invoices, scheduling, and growth before anyone had invited her into the work. "We'd need a business account," Rachel said, "and somebody to handle orders." Pamela looked at her. Rachel softened her tone. "I'm saying you shouldn't have to do every part yourself." "You're right. I can set it up. Craig already knows me. I handled the auction contacts. I know what your bills are." Arthur looked down at his hands. Rachel continued, "We could operate it together. You and Arthur handle production. I manage the money and customers." There it was, offered as reconciliation and shaped exactly like the old arrangement. "You took the smokehouse key," Pamela said. "I explained that. You removed it, put it on your personal ring, and told me more than once that you had not. I forgot. You also read my files, held the sale during surgery, and signed away land without checking what Dad had recorded. I was trying to solve a real problem." "Yes." Rachel waited for the rest. "The problem was real," Pamela said. "Your solution treated my consent as unnecessary." Rachel's face hardened. "So, I'm not allowed to help now. You are not allowed to control the business," I said together. "You assigned yourself the money, customers, and orders before we had a contract. Those things have to be done. They will be." "By whom?" "Not decided yet." Rachel pushed her chair back. "You'd rather trust Craig than your daughter. I'm negotiating with Craig. I trusted you without negotiating." "That was the mistake." Rachel stood. "Then, I guess you have everything you want." "No." The answer stopped her. "I want the kitchen chair, copper kettle, parlor clock, carving knives, and missing blanket returned." Rachel looked toward the empty place at the table. "They're in my garage," she said. Arthur raised his head. "You took them," Pamela said. "I set them aside before the auction. People were handling everything. I didn't want good family pieces sold for $5. Why weren't they returned? I had other things happening. You found time to bring closing papers." Rachel gripped the back of the chair. "I protected them. You decided where they belonged. I can bring them back. Do that. And then what? Then you will have returned things that were mine." Rachel's eyes filled again. "You really can make everything sound cold." Pamela's voice stayed level. "I am not going to reward a necessary act as though it were an apology. I said I'd bring them. That is a start." Rachel took her folder and left. Craig remained by the table, uncomfortable but not pretending otherwise. "I'll send a draft," he said. "Send it to me." "I will. And Arthur gets copied on production requirements, not financial terms." Arthur looked surprised. "He understands the building," Pamela said. "He needs to know what his work must support." Craig agreed and left. Glenda stayed. "I shouldn't have sent Rachel that statement without telling you," she said. "No. I kept thinking if both of you had the same paper, you'd stop circling each other. We were not arguing about the paper. I see that now." Pamela touched the archival sleeve Janice had left. "I shouldn't have ended the call the way I did." Glenda nodded. "No, you shouldn't have. They did not hug." Glenda made coffee, washed the cups from the review, and helped Pamela place the deed in the locked cash box until a secure storage arrangement could be made. She put the key to the cash box in Pamela's hand. It was a small act, but a clear one. Glenda did not decide where the deed should go. She helped Pamela put it where Pamela chose. The corrected auction papers arrived the next morning. The 4-acre boundary followed Howard's attached description. Craig's revised price reflected only the surrounding property. Pamela read every page. She asked questions about access from County Road B, the well boundary, and the right to reach the smokehouse. The deed protected a strip connecting the homestead to the road. Craig's purchase did not cross it. She signed the corrected closing direction herself. Rachel did not attend. 2 days later, the surrounding acreage closed. The auction company deducted its fees and released the remaining equipment proceeds to Pamela. The balance was lower than the figures Rachel had shown before surgery. Pamela paid the propane bill, the property taxes, the first hospital charges, and Arthur's wages. When she handed him the check, he looked at the amount. You included the first 3 days. You worked the first 3 days. I was helping. You were also working. Arthur folded the check into his wallet. Then, I'm buying lunch. That is not how wages work. It is how lunch works. Craig's contract arrived that afternoon. Pamela read it with the same yellow pencil she had used in the hospital. She changed the production schedule, removed language that could give Craig control over equipment, and added a clear statement that the Holt name and curing method remained hers. Craig accepted most changes. They argued over minimum volume and settled on a lower first year while the building returned to service. The 5-year total remained $240,000 if Pamela met the agreed production. She signed only after Arthur reviewed the practical requirements with her. Rachel returned near dusk in a rented cargo van. She carried the kitchen chair in first, then the kettle, clock, wrapped knives, and folded blanket. Each item was clean. The chair had a fresh scratch across one rung. Rachel set it in its old place. I'm sorry, she said. Pamela ran one finger over the scratch. For which part? Rachel looked tired. I don't know how to answer that without making you angrier. Try being specific. I'm sorry I held the auction while you were in surgery. I'm sorry I took the key and told you I didn't. I'm sorry I kept acting like needing my help meant you had no right to stop me. Pamela listened. Rachel waited, hoping for a sentence that would return her to the family role she understood. Thank you for bringing the things back, Pamela said. That's all? That is what I can say today. Rachel looked toward the smokehouse. New roof metal caught the last gray light. What if I want to help with the business? You don't start with the business. Then where? You start by coming to the door and asking whether you may enter. You return keys when asked. You don't handle my accounts. You don't speak for me. For how long? I don't know. Rachel nodded once. It was not agreement so much as recognition that no faster answer was available. She left the farmhouse key on the table before walking out. Pamela picked it up and placed it in the drawer. Rachel had returned access without being forced, but she had not regained trust. Outside, Arthur switched on the work light in the smokehouse. The next morning, they would remove the first curing rack, scrub the stone floor, and begin the long repair Craig's contract now required. They began at 8. Arthur lifted the first white oak rack from its wall brackets, while Pamela sat on the high stool and labeled each piece with masking tape. The joints had to return to the same positions. Howard had fitted them by hand, and no two were quite alike. Glenda arrived with rubber gloves and 3 stiff brushes. You're not paying me, she said before Pamela could ask. I wasn't planning to. Good. Glenda scrubbed hooks at a basin in the yard. Arthur carried the racks to sawhorses. Pamela mixed the cleaning solution, checked each board for cracks, and recorded the work in a new ledger. After 40 minutes, her right foot began to drag. Arthur noticed. Time. I can finish this rack. It'll be here after lunch. Pamela wanted to keep going. Craig's first inspection was 3 weeks away, and the list on the wall seemed to grow whenever she crossed out an item. She set down the brush. Learning to stop before pain forced her was another kind of work. It left no clean floor or straight roof behind, but the smokehouse depended on it as much as the new support did. They spent the next 2 weeks cleaning brick, replacing damaged work surfaces, and repairing the upper vents. A plumber installed a wash sink and a line from the farmhouse well. Pamela paid the invoice from the released auction money. The farmhouse needed attention too. Arthur fixed the leaking porch joint. He added a handrail beside the shower and moved a heavy cabinet so Pamela could reach the pantry without bending. She objected to the handrail until she used it. Rachel called the day after the cleaning began. May I come by? Pamela looked through the kitchen window. Rachel's car was already parked near the mailbox. You're here. I didn't come up the drive. Pamela noticed that. What do you need? I brought groceries. I can leave them on the porch. You may come in. Rachel carried 2 bags to the back door and waited for Pamela to unlock it. She did not reach for the handle. Inside, she set milk, eggs, bread, and vegetables on the table. I didn't know what you needed, she said, so I kept the receipt. Thank you. Rachel looked toward the cash box. Do you want me to enter it anywhere? No. All right. The answer came without argument. She stayed for coffee. When Pamela's medication alarm sounded, Rachel did not reach for the bottle or ask whether the dose had been taken. She waited while Pamela handled it. That was the first test. The second came 4 days later, when Craig called during supper. A retailer wanted the first delivery moved forward by a week. Rachel was at the table with Pamela and Arthur. She had come to return a stack of farm statements she had kept at home. I can talk to him, she said. Scheduling is simple. Pamela held out the phone. You can tell him I'll call tomorrow after I check the curing calendar. Nothing else? Rachel took the phone. Craig, Pamela will call tomorrow after she checks the calendar. She listened. No, I can't approve the date. Another pause. You'll have to ask her. Rachel returned the phone. Craig waited until morning. Pamela kept the original delivery date. The old Rachel would have moved the schedule, then explained why it made sense. This time, she let a customer remain inconvenienced rather than use authority she had not been given. Trust did not return because of one correct phone call. Pamela simply wrote the action where she kept track of things that mattered. By the third week, the smokehouse passed its structural inspection. The water test came back clean. Craig walked through the building in white coveralls, checking surfaces with the seriousness he had once given the roof. Arthur opened the firebox. Pamela adjusted the vents. The thermometer held steady. Craig signed the approval for a test batch. The first hams arrived on a cold April morning. Pamela weighed each one, recorded the numbers, and showed Arthur the salt ratio Howard had used. Arthur already knew it, but he let her lead. They worked at waist-high tables to protect Pamela's back. She rested every hour. Arthur handled the lifting. Glenda brought lunch and stayed to wrap the prepared meat. When the smoke began, it moved through the racks exactly as it had during the test. Pamela sat outside beneath the overhang with Howard's cure ledger open beside her new one. His entries were short and impatient. Weather wet. Add day. Good color. Arthur talks too much. She showed the last line to Arthur. He wrote that because I caught him using green hickory, he said. You use green hickory, only once. Dad underlined too much. Arthur looked at the page. That was for emphasis? The batch took weeks, not days. Pamela checked temperature before breakfast and again before bed. On damp mornings, she opened the upper vent by the width of 2 fingers. When her leg hurt, Arthur made the trip. Craig collected samples after curing. He cut the first slice at the farmhouse table, chewed, and reached for another without speaking. Pamela waited. The salt is right, he said. Smoke is clean. Texture holds. That means it passes. He signed the first purchase order. The payment covered meat, supplies, Arthur's wages, utilities, and part of Pamela's remaining hospital bill. The margin was modest. The work was real. So was the next order. By early summer, neighbors began asking whether Pamela would cure small private batches. She accepted only what the schedule allowed. Some brought pork shoulders and coolers. Others brought venison and asked Arthur questions he had answered for 40 years. People stayed because Pamela kept coffee in the farmhouse, and because Glenda often arrived with something warm from the oven. The empty kitchen chair was used again. Rachel came by twice a week. For a while, she only delivered supplies Pamela ordered and carried laundry from the cellar. She always knocked. One afternoon, she placed a printed page on the table. What is this? Pamela asked. A work application. There's no application. There is now. Rachel had listed bookkeeping, order entry, cleaning, and customer calls. At the bottom, she had written that she would accept ordinary wages, scheduled hours, and no signing authority. Pamela read it carefully. You cannot handle the business account. I know. You cannot promise delivery dates. I know. You report hours like Arthur. Yes. And if this becomes an argument about being family, the job ends. Rachel swallowed. All right. Pamela hired her for 2 afternoons a week, starting with order entry and cleaning. The wage was the same Pamela would have paid anyone with the same duties. On Rachel's first afternoon, a neighbor tried to hand her cash for a curing order. Rachel pointed to Pamela. She sets the price and gives the receipt. The neighbor looks surprised. Rachel did not explain. Later, she entered the order exactly as Pamela approved it and placed the cash envelope in front of her mother. That was the third test. There were failures too. Rachel once rearranged the supply shelf without asking. Pamela made her put everything back. Another afternoon, she answered Craig's question about holiday volume before checking with Pamela. Pamela reduced the order to what the Smokehouse could safely produce. "I was trying to keep the contract strong," Rachel said. "The contract stays strong because we deliver what we promise." Rachel went quiet, then corrected the order sheet herself. She did not threaten to leave. Pamela did not soften the boundary to keep her. By autumn, the 4-acre homestead looked cared for again. The porch roof no longer leaked. The farmhouse windows had been reglazed, and Pamela painted the mudroom a warm cream, while Arthur handled the high corners. The smokehouse roof ran straight from front to back. Clean racks filled the interior. Howard's old ledgers remained in the steel compartment with the deed, both protected in archival sleeves. The brass key stayed on Pamela's ring. She had a duplicate made for the outer door only. Arthur carried it for work. Nobody else did. Craig's trucks came on a regular schedule. He bought what the contract required and never asked Pamela to shorten a cure. Local customers came on separate days, often lingering in the kitchen after their orders were weighed and tagged. Rachel remained an employee during working hours and a daughter only when Pamela invited her to stay. One Friday evening, after the last customer left, Rachel wiped the long table in the smokehouse and hung the cloth to dry. "May I stay for supper?" she asked. Pamela was tired. Her back ached, and there were invoices waiting in the kitchen. She looked at Rachel, who had worked her scheduled hours, recorded them, and asked instead of assuming. "Yes," Pamela said. Set the table. Arthur brought in a pot of beans. Glenda carried cornbread wrapped in a towel. Rachel placed 5 plates around the farmhouse table, including one at the chair she had returned. Pamela unlocked the cash box and paid Rachel and Arthur before anyone ate. Rachel counted her wages, signed the ledger, and put the money in her own bag. No one called it forgiveness. Supper did not erase the hospital room, the missing key, or the empty yard after the auction. It was simply supper, offered after work and accepted within the life Pamela now controlled. If stories about reclaiming dignity after family abandonment matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. Snow came early that year. On the first cold Saturday, neighbors arrived with wrapped meat, stamped order cards, and boots covered in white. Arthur tended the firebox. Rachel checked names against Pamela's ledger, then waited for approval before assigning rack space. Glenda filled the coffee pot twice. By evening, the last customer had gone. 5 supper plates dried beside the sink. Pamela walked through the mudroom without the walker and checked the brass key on her ring. Outside, Arthur opened the upper vent. Smoke moved steadily into the dark air. Rachel carried her coat to the back door. "Same time, Tuesday?" 2 o'clock, Pamela said. "I'll knock." "I know." Rachel stepped onto the porch. Arthur and Glenda followed her to their cars. Pamela waited until their headlights reached County Road B. The farmhouse settled into evening warmth behind her. The restored clock sounded once from the parlor. Pamela closed the farmhouse door against the Wisconsin cold, while warm smoke rose from Howard's restored smokehouse.